Good morning. I am Kenyon McDuffie, at-large council member and chair of the Council's Committee on Business and Economic Development. Today is Wednesday, May 1st, 2024, and we are convening this hearing in a hybrid fashion, both via Zoom and from room 412 of the John A. Wilson Building. This hearing is also being streamed live on the council's website. Time is 9:39 a.m., and I'm calling to order this budget oversight hearing. This is the committee's fourth and final budget oversight hearing for the fiscal year 2025 budget season. Throughout our budget oversight hearings, we have been hearing from agencies about the adjustments they're making as the district adjusts to the new budgetary pressures, as well as the lower than expected revenue growth projections. Again, as I've alluded to before, the issue is that the district's revenues are growing more slowly than our spending. In this budget, and for the next couple of years, we'll be working on fixing those critical issues. There's some other wrinkles that we're facing in this year's budget, including outstanding questions raised by the CFO about a local reserve fund issue, as well as future cash flow issues. As the committee works through this budget, we are mindful that cuts to programs and services cannot sacrifice the long-term promises made to our most vulnerable. The fiscal year 2024 proposed budget includes $11.4 billion in local funds and $20.9 billion overall. This represents a 7% increase in local funds and a 5.6% increase in overall from the fiscal year 2024. This morning, we're going to hear from the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, as well as the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development about their agency's budgets. Government witnesses will have 7 minutes for opening statements, and that's going to be followed by rounds of questions if any additional members of the committee or council members attend the hearing. At this time, I want to acknowledge that, nope, nobody's on, so we're going to go ahead and move to our government witness. First, we're going to hear from the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, or the CFO. The OCFO is an independent agency in the district that assists the mayor and council in maintaining fiscal and financial stability, accountability, and integrity of government of the District of Columbia. The OCFO ensures the district spending levels remain within approved budgets and available revenues for each fiscal year, so that spending deficits do not occur. It manages the district's debt and finances, administers tax payment compliance, oversees its financial management systems, and produces the district's annual comprehensive financial report. The proposed fiscal year 2025 operating budget for the OCFO is approximately $228.7 million, which represents a 1.7% increase from the fiscal year 2024 approved operating budget of approximately $224.9 million. The OCFO's proposed budget is mostly comprised of local funds, which make up $172.9 million of the OCFO's budget, and special purpose revenue funds, which make up $54 million. The agency has budgeted for 1,057 full-time equivalents, or FTEs, which is a decrease of 8 FTEs from the approved fiscal year 2024 budget. With that, I'm going to turn to our government witness, the Chief Financial Officer and his team. Before we get going with your testimony, if you all could raise your right hand so you can be sworn in. Do you each swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to provide to the Council of the District of Columbia and the Committee on Business and Economic Development is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you each very much. Good morning to you. You can begin your testimony whenever you're ready.
Good morning, excuse me. Good morning, Chairman McDuffie and members of the Committee on Business and Economic Development. I am Glenn Lee, Chief Financial Officer of the District of Columbia. I am pleased to appear before you today to discuss the proposed fiscal year 2025 budget for the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, or OCFO. The OCFO's fiscal year 2025 budget request supports the mission and functions of our agency. Attached is a PowerPoint presentation through which I will discuss the budget in greater detail. Afterwards, I would be pleased to answer any questions the committee may have. So if we could go to the next slide, please. I think as you described, our mission of OCFO is to enhance the fiscal and financial stability, accountability, and integrity of the government of the District of Columbia. Next slide, please. To do this, we allocate our budget, as you noted, of $228 million in the way displayed here in this pie chart, you'll note that over 40%, almost 45% of our budget is allocated to our tax and revenue operation. Very specifically, the majority of our spending, or the largest portion of our spending by a long shot, is the tax administration, which, as you know, is our responsibility per the Home Rule Act. Second is our finance and treasury operation, which provides services ranging from frontline cashiering activities and managing payments to the district to issuing debt and managing our cash balances. They're roughly 20% of our budget. And then our accounting systems and staff consumes about 13% of our budget. I will note that our budget display here is changed a bit so that we emphasize the IT components of specifically OTR and OFIS, which so we've included their IT spending in their portion rather than pull out IT spending as its own separate expense. Because the reality is the very complex and successful tax administration IT system is an expense because we have a tax system, not because we pull it aside as an independent information technology group. Same with our financial system, which now we're in our second year of using it. It's known as DIFS. Next slide, please. Now here is a look at the allocation of how we spend our money, specifically rather than by program, by either personnel services or non-personnel services. And as you see there, roughly 60% of our budget goes to our staff, our very capable staff across our different program areas. Of that, about of the 1,057 people that this supports, about 950 are supported from local funds, local general fund, and about 115 are supported by non-local revenues, primarily special revenues, and we'll talk about that in a second. Next slide, please. As we noted, our budget is roughly $228 million, and it's comprised really of three categories. And really, this is a look of how what supports our budget. The first is roughly $173 million, as you noted, the majority of our spending, which are local funds. In addition, we have a very small grant from the federal government. This grant facilitates our processes that make payment to beneficiaries of our many social service programs. And then we are supported by $54 million in special purpose revenue. And effectively, the majority of these are administrative fees that are charged related to different business operations that support our activity. For example, many, if not most of our administration of payroll and payment of our retirement responsibilities to retirees are paid for through a variety of administrative fees. And that's been true for years. And so therefore you see a large portion of our budget is supported by these administrative fees. Next slide, please. So what are adjustments in our budget? It is, you're accurate to indicate that our budget overall increased by 1.7% roughly, or 1.5% to 2%. However, our local fund budget did not increase. In fact, it's, I believe, under $20,000 difference between proposed 25 and fiscal year 24. However, we did have expense increases to maintain this current level of effort of our activities, and so that required several adjustments. The first category reflects adjustments that really don't change our activity of the amount of business we provide, just rather reflects increased expenses. The first item in particular The $1.9 million increase reflects the fact that we, out of our budget, pay for credit card fees for clients and customers of the district. When they pay their bills through credit cards, there's a fee. Inherent in our budget is that fee that's paid to the banks. As there's more credit card transactions, inherently that cost goes up. So nearly $2 million increase in our budget just reflects the fact that the transaction volumes and dollars are going up. So therefore we have a greater expense. It doesn't reflect an expansion of program or anything. It's just what I would call a pass-through expense. We received additional resources to, as did most, if not all, agencies, to deal with cost increases associated with COLAs. And we received relatively more money from the federal government through the grant that I spoke of earlier. Second category of budget adjustments I want to describe are reductions in our budget that were not necessarily a reduction in program and service, rather reflected basically a one-time expense for fiscal year 24. Overall, that's about $800,000, and there were some FTEs. In effect, for 1 year, we had additional resources from Octo, including FTE. Octo's reclaimed those again. That's fine. It literally is not affecting our service, but part of our budget changes. Finally, we've reduced our services, our direct frontline services, by about $2 million in fiscal year 2025. At least that's in the proposed budget, which will reduce our FTE count by 13 employees. So that's the highlight of our budget, and we would be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you for the presentation. I do have some questions. I'm going to start with some questions based on testimony we received from public witnesses when we held that hearing some weeks ago. And during that hearing, several public witnesses took issue with your position regarding the fiscal stabilization fund. And I want to just give you an opportunity to give us any updates as to where things stand with respect to the position about replenishing the fund. Is there any updates beyond where things had been some weeks ago?
We could ask that the viewers be able to see our slide package again. We have a couple
Which
slides.
do you want to reference?
It's not sent. Okay. All right. All right. In the PowerPoint we provided, there should be 2 additional slides that was provided. But in any case, here's the perspective.
Let me just be clear, because I want to be able to give you the information, or at least show it to the public while you're describing it, because I don't think it's a PowerPoint that we have, but we have 7 slides
Okay.
in the PowerPoint.
So let's.
So we'll move this to the,
Yeah.
I'll ask this after we've rectified the slides issue. I'm gonna move on for now, and we'll come back to that. Let's talk about the Child Wealth Building Act, which is a program that I know your office is familiar with and has been working hard on. But there are also several public witnesses who noted the changes to the program made in the mayor's proposed budget. The changes specifically that limiting eligibility, reducing the annual contribution, and eliminating the inflation adjustment mean that dramatically fewer children will benefit, and those who still do will receive much less than was originally intended under the law that the council passed and funded. So can you share how many children were projected to be eligible under the original program versus how many will be eligible under the program that would be established if the mayor's proposed changes are enacted?
First and foremost, I want to describe that our role in administrating the program is to handle the contributions that the district makes and then distribute those as is appropriate, whatever the benefits are, whatever the contributions are. And we believe, as we've discussed, that we've set up a good process with a vendor that's a nationally renowned processor for those kinds of benefit administration programs. So we're excited and ready to go and looking now for the budget to set the benefits and contribution rates. Off the top of my head, I don't believe I can provide you an estimate of the change in beneficiaries or dollar amounts that the mayor's proposal would lead to. You know, we are the administrators of the program and we'll follow the rules as council and mayor decide.
I'll mention, and maybe your team is familiar with these numbers, but the original fiscal impact statement estimated approximately 4,150 enrolled during the first year of the program and 45,000 approximately by year 18 of the program. We received some information from your office, specifically from ORA, that now estimates approximately 18,185 individuals will be enrolled under the mayor's proposed subtitle. I don't know if those numbers sound familiar to anybody on your team?
Yeah, that would have been, good morning, Councilmember.
Morning.
That would have been.
If you could just state your name
Yeah.
for the record.
I'm sorry, my name is Angel Jacobs. I'm the Deputy CFO and Chief of Staff. Those numbers would have been, as you said, come from the Office of Revenue Analysis and working with the Department of Human Services as they look at the new eligibility requirements.
Mhm.
And then based on the information provided by DHS, those would be the estimates.
Okay. And perhaps y'all don't have this information, but I think it is important to put on the record for this hearing. For those beneficiaries under the program who do reach age 18, there's a question about what they've gotten under the council's original bill, the amount they would have received under the council's original bill versus what the mayor is now proposing. And these numbers come from the Urban Institute. Approximately $31,000 would have been the amount that recipients would have received under the council's original bill that we passed. And then we got some testimony from advocacy groups that estimate under the mayor's proposed subtitle, the amount would drop significantly from $31,000 to approximately $13,000. And so I want to put that on the record so that people at home who are listening understand what's being proposed and the drastic cuts in the program. This coming after the program was defunded last year, and we worked really hard with my colleagues at the council, particularly the chairman, to identify funds to restore that program. So we've heard that Citibank, you mentioned the vendor, we heard that Citibank was selected earlier this year to be the financial services vendor to help manage the program. What's the next steps in implementation, and will the mayor's subtitle changes affect any of the ongoing work that your office is doing with the vendor you identified?
Well, if eligibility changes, and I understand that some of the changes being proposed, then we would have to match those changes and make sure that as money is set aside, that we're accumulating for individuals the amount that if that proposal becomes law and moves forward, that we're ensuring that on an individual basis or a group basis, when they are eligible, that those payments would reflect that change.
Right.
Again, that we're neutral on that. It would, take a bit to reorganize how we have set up the administration, but it would not be material relative to moving forward.
Well, thank you for sharing that. There's a particular concern that I have, which is that while the deposited funds are meant to be designated for each beneficiary of the program, the funds are not segregated. When the bill was originally drafted, it intended that the funds be held in individual accounts, but the office under your predecessor indicated that that was not feasible. And so I'm curious as to what is the barrier to setting up individual accounts for the intended beneficiaries of the program?
I think what's important when you're administering a benefit program like this is that we have information about the individuals when they become eligible that allows us at that point in time to calculate their benefit and then execute the payment of that benefit.
Mhm.
That's first and foremost. Setting individual accounts aside means that all through their journey until their full benefits, you're adjusting that amount depending on their status changes. It's easier to have, as with the retirement system, a global amount of money that's managed, and then as individuals become eligible, that we calculate with detail what their benefits are and make the payment that's intended.
I appreciate the example you cited with respect to the retirement benefits, because the retirement benefits are not established in a fund that the mayor can take money from. Is that correct?
Yes, it's a trust. Yes.
It's a trust. And this program, the Child Wealth Building Act, was intended to create trusts for the eligible babies born into poverty and families making up to 300% of the federal poverty level. And so I'd like to be able to work with you on a solution that address the concerns that you have raised, but that also protects the accounts from annual, from always being on the chopping block in terms of the budget process, as we've seen in the last couple of cycles. Would you agree to work with me to try to figure out how to set up protected accounts for this program?
Of course.
Okay.
Of course.
Appreciate that. Okay, I understand that. I think you all have figured out the situation with the slides that you like to show, and so I'd love to go back to the question I raised about the fiscal stabilization fund and
Absolutely.
where things stand right now.
Absolutely. So if we can bring up our presentation. So here's the fundamental concern, and our charts can illustrate this. Currently, our general fund balance, at least as of the end of fiscal year 23, is 4.9, nearly $5 billion. It's composed really of two different categories of resources. The first category are a series of reserves that are established by either federal law or district law. The second are, in effect, set-asides that for different program areas or literally surpluses relative to what was anticipated to be spent. That value is roughly $2.3 billion. So that's nearly half of our overall fund balance. Now, as you know, both the fiscal year 24 through 27 financial plan and the 25 through 28 plan anticipates liquidating the second category, the accumulated surpluses or set-asides that the council has made over the years. Now, this is the right slide. So the two categories I described first are the different shaded colors other than green are the different set-asides, reserves, if you will. The second, the green slide, or the green shaded area are the accumulated surpluses. The financial plan anticipates spending all of those resources. And so that's just important to know that the financial plan in 24 through 27, and as the mayor submitted, is balanced and is a reasonable use. It does not exceed the either revenues or resources that we believe are available in this time period, but that inherently means that chunk of money will be spent by the end of the financial plan. The second issue I want to bring up is that as with many, if not most, major jurisdictions, our spending patterns within a year do not match our revenue patterns. So what does that mean? That means there are times a year where we spend a lot more than we have collected in our different revenue streams. And then other times of the year where we collect more revenue than we're actually spending. And for a variety of reasons, our expenses are much higher in the front part of the year, the first 4 to 5 months of the year, than the revenues we collect, largely because of the property tax. We don't receive property tax until 6 months in. As a result, there are points in time in the year where we've spent hundreds of millions of dollars more than we've collected. Now, to be clear, by the end of the year, we're balanced. If our forecasts are accurate, people spend within their budget, we are fine. We've spent no more than we've received. However, there are points in time in the year where, as I said, we've spent dramatically more than the revenue we've collected up until that point. And in the last 2 Marches, including the one that just occurred, that total spend in addition over and above revenue collected is roughly $1.7 to $2 billion. So think of it this way: if a household earns $1,000 a month and they're paid monthly, and they start their checking account at zero, until they get their paycheck, they're in a negative position in their checkbook. And so at the start of the year, or start of the month, they actually need money in the checkbook in order to pay bills until the payday occurs. Same with the district, only, as you would imagine, with a $20 billion budget, far more complex. The bottom line is that we have to manage our liquidity. And that is a financial term for meaning nothing more than making sure that we can pay our bills on time when they're due, despite the inconsistencies between when bills need to be paid and the revenues we collect throughout the year. Again, we're not talking about an unbalanced budget, because by the end of the year, revenues received, if our forecasts are accurate, and expenses, as long as people spend within the appropriations, are balanced. But throughout the year, there are points in time where we have a lot more revenue on hand than expenses, and other times where it's the reverse. The peak of that, or the trough, if you will, is roughly, in the last couple of years, been between $1.7 and $2 billion of more spending than revenue. So going back to this pie chart, when we have roughly $5 billion in reserves and accumulated surpluses that altogether are the general fund balance, being in the hole, if you will, for a couple months of $2 billion is easily manageable because we have $5 billion. However, if you move to the next slide. Next slide, please. In the next slide, it'll show that the effect of spending the large green area, which is the accumulated surpluses, and in addition, the specific funds that we can't use for cash management purposes for a variety of reasons. There we go. Thank you. So the resources we have available to meet our liquidity needs are roughly $1.6 billion, or yes, about $1.6 billion. And as I said, this is the sum of the resources that are available for our cash pool. So the combination of spending our accumulated surpluses of $2.2 billion, and then the requirement, thank you, the requirement that we set aside particular reserves and not use them for cash management, means that we end up with less resources available than what we need to pay bills on time, basically. And there are several components of, as you know, of fiscal activity and fiscal responsibilities the district has to avoid a control board action. And I'm sure you're familiar with what that is. One has to do with liquidity. Now, it's a complicated rule that we haven't had to think about as an organization for years and years. But because we're spending our accumulated surpluses, our fund balance will be half of what it is today, and setting aside the reserves that we can't use for cash flow, we end up, especially without replenishing the stabilization fund, with less resources on hand to pay bills than we need. Now, we have to pay our bills. If we don't pay for example, our debt service on time, if we don't pay pension on time, if we don't pay payroll on time, which is every 2 weeks, that immediately triggers a control board. So event. So we have to have enough liquidity on hand to pay our bills.
No, I
So
appreciate that.
this is the context of our request.
Got it. So I'm not going to get into, I'm going to allow you to put that on the record, but I want to acknowledge that there is a difference of opinion on this issue as it relates to what's been discussed publicly between the chairman, the mayor, and more recently, the Office of the Attorney General, where the AG has provided an opinion that seems to differ from the one that you have expressed. What I will say, what I will ask is, are there conversations that have been had that suggest that there would be a way to strike a compromise around how to move forward? Or at least, are you talking? The public wants to know, are you talking to the chairman? Are you talking to the mayor? Are conversations happening around this issue?
We've had discussions with the chairman because right now the budget is
It's with the council.
with council. And we look forward to more discussions.
How would you characterize those discussions?
I'm sorry?
How would you characterize the discussions you've had with the chairman?
Oh, I wouldn't, our discussions are between us and the chairman.
I'm not asking for details
right.
of the discussions. I'm asking,
I think
how would you characterize them? Have they been productive?
I think we both understand our different positions well, and he understands the need here. There's a couple of ideas that he may have that we don't think work, especially in an environment where we don't anticipate the robust financial performance that the district has enjoyed for 15 years.
Got it.
Very specifically, when we started the presentation, you pointed out that we're in an environment of very low growth of revenue. And also, as is happening to my organization, we're cutting our back on our budget. When you cut back on budgets across agencies, the amount of surplus or savings you have, in other words, spending that's below the appropriations, as a percentage goes down. And that's because we have less money to basically do the same services, so we manage our dollars in general very, very close. And in my 30 years of experience in this industry, I see that when you squeeze departments financially, and that is, of course, the choice that the mayor and council make, and that's fine. The amount of savings you get at the end of the year from departments goes down and goes down rapidly. In fact, in fiscal year 23, we had less than 1% savings relative to appropriations. I don't know the specific history, but that's substantially less than has occurred in the past.
But I also think it's important to point out what you said a little earlier in describing the situation. I believe you mentioned, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, notwithstanding the cash flow issues that you described, if those issues happen throughout the course of a fiscal year, does not mean that the budget is unbalanced, correct?
I'm sorry, I'm not tracking.
In other words, once a council appropriates funding and a budget is passed and is balanced, the issues that you described around cash flow and needing to be able to pay your bills, sometimes, real estate revenue, taxes come in slower than some of the bills
Right.
are due. But I thought you mentioned that it does not unbalance the budget that was passed
No.
with enough resources and revenues to pay for what is in the budget.
Thank you for clarifying. There's two conditions to the statement that over a year, if a budget's balanced, we have enough resources during the year to pay our bills for the entire year. First is that departments spend no more than their appropriation authority. And second, that our revenue forecasts are accurate and to your point, that actual revenues are at least what our forecasts were. If that condition exists, our revenues are at least what our forecast is, and we don't have overspending, then by the end of the year, we've collected, by definition, the money we need to pay our bills.
And that revenue forecast, which this budget is based on, happened in February, correct?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
sir.
All
Yes.
right. And so long as the council passes a budget that is balanced based on revenues that your office forecasted in February, it is considered a balanced budget.
In general, I'm
Okay.
not, but that doesn't change the liquidity issue that we talk about. The fact that
Yeah, I'm not,
typically and so that is another condition we have to consider, as is setting
But-
aside money
but
to pay
that
pensions.
condition
and-
that you have to consider is one that happens after the budget is passed by the council, is it
No.
not?
No, there are several conditions that we need to ensure the budget addresses, and they're spelled out in the control board.
But what I'm asking though is when this budget is passed
Yes,
on final reading, if it is based on the revenues that your office forecasted in February and the resources are there, the council, whether or not it raises revenues, so long as it's not less than what you projected.
yes, I'll
Sure.
answer that very specifically. If we decide to not contribute what the actuaries from the retirement board determined are what is needed to pay for our retirement obligations. So in other words, the budget passes, its overall spending is at or just below the revenue forecast, but not enough money is set aside to meet our pension obligations. That is a control board violation. So what I'm saying is
You-
there's several.
I see where you want to go with this, and
Right.
I was not intending to try to go down this path. I wanted to give you an opportunity,
Right.
because this isn't budget oversight hearing, for you to
Right.
put your
Yep.
position on the record. I thought
Thank
that
you.
would be fair
Thank
to
you.
you in your
I
office.
appreciate that.
I'm not intending to try to have you spell out every potential scenario that could, cause some sort of control board trigger. I was basically asking, a basic question about
Mhm.
responsibilities, right? The council gets the budget from the mayor. We have 70 days to pass it. The mayor proposes a budget based on
Right.
the revenues that you project in February, correct?
That is, yes,
Okay, and that budget that the mayor provided to the council 3 weeks ago was certified as balanced by your office, correct? When we got it?
that is true. Yes.
Okay, so long as we use the numbers that have been provided there as the numbers that we would look to pass a budget. I'm really trying to keep this as basic as possible for the
Sure.
folks who might be at home trying to understand this issue.
Right.
We can't spend more than you have projected in revenues.
That's one of a handful of conditions, yes.
Okay.
Right.
there are conditions that I know you want to talk about. I don't think this is the most, I'll tell you this way. I'm not intending to go down that path for you to talk about all these conditions because I think it might bring up some issues that further complicate what I think is an issue that could be settled
Okay,
through discussions with
thank
the
you.
council in your office.
Thank you.
And I would like to see those issues discussed
Right.
and settled. And I'm hopeful that we get to that point. So I'll leave it there for now, since you've had the opportunity to describe what you see as
Thank
the
you.
issue. Not conceding any point in terms of what could happen potentially in terms of the council's responsibility or obligations. But again, I'm hopeful that these conversations will be productive and lead to an outcome that allows us to pass a budget and take care of the needs of the residents of the District of Columbia. I'm going to pick up talking about the revenue estimates, but for a different reason. The Office of Revenue Analysis forecasts revenue for the district on a quarterly basis, as we talked about a little earlier.
Mhm.
And it's been a couple months since your office provided the February revenue estimate. Since that time, the Federal Reserve has started to signal a bit that there may not be rate cuts this year. And obviously that could change, but that's where we are now and today. And the interest rate expectations have crept up a bit. If I recall, our last several revenue briefings, you had internalized a soft landing scenario.
Yes.
And so now that the Fed seems to have backed off that a bit, how have the last 2 months influenced your thinking regarding potential impacts on district revenues?
So it's too early to tell because what was difficult to estimate is exactly when those reductions would occur. So they still could occur. But the bigger picture from my perspective is the following. There's both good and bad news about the Fed not taking an action to reduce interest rates. The good news is that the economy is performing very well, at least nationally. The economy is performing well. A component of that is the inflation rate remains above the target for the Fed. So from their perspective, the economy is still robust. Job formation is very strong in general. And so the good news is the economy is still relatively strong. That along with, but with a higher level of inflation that the Fed wants. So there isn't, to use the analogy, maybe not a landing occurring. We're still moving along, which helps the district's economy, no doubt. As the notion is that as there would be a point in time where the economy would actually very robustly react to the higher interest rates that would slow the national economy down, and therefore the Fed would begin reducing their interest rates. What they're saying now is that the economy is growing robustly and inflation is too high, and so we are unsure when we're going to execute the rate reductions.
Okay.
So from a forecasting point of view, it's hard to tease out the good news of the strong economy versus slightly higher inflation versus a soft landing. I hope that's clear.
I appreciate that's helpful. You talked a little bit earlier about property tax payments.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's still early, but it might be worth asking whether you've been able to review real property tax payments that your office received last month and compare to those forecasts that you made most recently in February.
Yeah, I've not seen the latest numbers. There's two components to property tax that we worry about is the actual payments for this year. But we also worry about assessed value for the out years. And as you know, we're in the process of evaluating assessed values and appeals to assessed values for the out years. And so both are important to understand relative to our forecast. And the latter, we're a week or two away because the end of April's a couple critical processing dates for us. So it's too early to tell right now whether
What
there's
about-
any particular strength or weakness in our forecast.
When do you all start to see, sort of have enough of the appeals within your office, the first level appeals, to potentially see any trends there? Are you seeing anything with the appeals, particularly in commercial office
Yeah,
thus far?
clearly a major concern, major concern. At the moment, the assessments and compilation of the data are not available. And that's fine. It typically isn't until later on this month, and it will certainly inform our forecast that's due at the end of June. And I'm being evasive because in our process, we're not done yet doing
Okay.
the analyses that we need to do that you're suggesting we do.
Will that process occur this month such that you have a sense before the June estimate?
Hard to say. I mean, if there's clearly, if there's a dramatic downturn, we have an obligation to inform our colleagues, you
Okay.
and the mayor's office. But we're in such uncharted waters with commercial real estate, as you know, that that our processes and normal rules have to be thought of in the context of being in very different circumstances that could be quite extraordinary.
Mhm.
I don't know if you saw recently in the last actually 2 or 3 days, there's been press on the fact that the number of commercial building foreclosures is now at record highs relative to 2000. That's another example of the tough situation, and that's nationally, not
Right,
only
right.
locally.
But there's also some information and reporting over the last several months about the District of Columbia in particular, with respect to office foreclosures. But it's also something that you factor in when you're making your estimates, right? What
Yeah,
data say
indirectly,
around that?
yes, absolutely.
Okay.
But what's really important is the process of commercial properties providing us data on their income and expenses.
Mhm.
That's happens in April. We haven't compiled all of that yet,
Mhm.
as well as looking at our appeal rate
Where-
information. So we're, and I can't speed that up. The deadlines are what they are to our taxpayers. But I fully understand your point. I'm very concerned about this as well.
Where are vacancy rates in commercial office for the district?
Our economists are indicating about 17 to 18% right now.
Mhm.
Our forecast assumes in district-wide, roughly 25 to 26% will be the high point of the vacancy rate. I'm sure if you had a group of developers or building managers, they would say, no, it'll be much higher than that.
Mhm.
There's assessments we do that we have confidence in, but again, we're in uncharted waters. So I appreciate that you're highlighting this risk to our forecast. I concur that it's very real.
Staying on some of the tax policy and information, combined reporting. And let me be clear from the outset, because I don't know if I was clear enough about the issue on the reserves, that I'm not intending to have a huge back and forth on this issue unless you want to put people to sleep or the folks at home to cut the television off. But I wanted to ask about Joyce versus Finnegan, sort of the combined reporting and the subtitle that is proposed, without getting too far into the weeds of what it is. I don't know if you got a simple way of explaining
Sure.
that, but I do want to ask, what's the impetus for changing how corporate filers with combined reporting allocate revenue?
So For multi-state jurisdictions, there are a variety of means or ways that those for corporations, multi-jurisdiction corporations, determine what share of either their profits or their gross business activity should be allocated or will be allocated to each state effectively. And for this purposes, the district acts and behaves as if it's a state, its own independent corporate tax. So what this shift does is it recognizes a new approach at those allocations that has proven to benefit states that have our corporate tax structure and our position in the market relative to many corporations that have presence here in the district. That's called apportionment, and there's no way to energize a social event more than to talk about corporate apportionment of income. So I don't know how far to go, but the bottom line is the fundamental rules for how companies determine what share of their profits, their income goes to each state for taxation purposes has a couple different ways of doing that. And this shift to this new way that's been affirmed through the courts provides likely relatively more revenue to the district because of the nature of firms, how we apply our corporate tax to corporations, and so forth.
And is it fair to conclude that there are some other similarly situated states that are also shifting?
There could be. Some are, some are not.
Okay.
And it has to do with the fundamental structure of their corporate taxation.
Okay.
And there is enough variety around the country that how these different rules apply or impact those different structures leads to different outcomes. So from our particular point of view, our tax administration and our ORA staff believe that there's a benefit to be had here.
I didn't hear the
Benefit
last
that's
part of what you were
relatively-
saying.
What's that?
I didn't hear the last part of your answer.
Our staff, our tax administration staff, as well as our revenue estimating staff, believe that applying that new approach for apportionment will lead to some revenue increase.
Okay. Well, you just answered my next question. I wanted to ask about that specifically, whether it was your opinion and the opinion of the team in your office that it would generate significant additional revenue for the district during the financial plan, but also to ask whether or not that revenue will continue even in the out years.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And to be clear, which method is the district intending to use under this subtitle?
Finnegan
Okay.
method would be the Finnegan method will be the method that would be adopted.
Got
The
it.
appropriate legislation is passed and so forth.
Let's talk a little bit about nonprofit solar projects. These power purchase agreements and the property tax implications for a moment. A couple of weeks ago, a nonprofit DC school reached out to our office regarding a decision by the OCFO, particularly OTR, to deny it a full real property tax exemption for one of its school properties based on an agreement it has with a solar company to install a solar system on the school's roof. From what I understand, it was a standard power purchase agreement that many schools, churches, and other nonprofit organizations utilize in the district and throughout the country, for that matter, to install solar to their buildings. Are you familiar with it?
I'm not familiar with this particular issue, and we're happy to assemble our team to answer the questions you
Okay.
have. Happy to do that.
I would definitely look forward to following up with you on this issue.
Of course.
Because this is something, the committee also has jurisdiction over utilities and has done some work in this area. And this is really something that's been done for any number of years in the District of Columbia. And so to see some sort of change now obviously has put people on edge, hence the calls that we received in our office. And so we look forward to following up with you on this.
Right. It could be a slight difference, a nuanced difference in the arrangement that that these folks have made. I don't know, but we're happy to do the research for you and answer your questions.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit more specifically about uh, your budget within the agency. Your operating budget for local funds is basically fat, as you mentioned in your opening testimony, but there's an increase for special purpose revenue funds of approximately $3 million more than fiscal year 2024. I believe you touched on it a little bit earlier, but if you could expound on what accounts for the increase in SPR funds.
The majority reflects allocation of some of our ongoing expenses to the administrative fees that we talked about.
Mhm.
That is a reasonable use of the appropriate use of those fees, and that's the majority by far, well over half. And that provides relief to our local fund.
Okay, and then let's also talk about vacancies.
Sure.
How many vacancies are there currently within the agency?
I'll ask our administrative officer here to provide that number. I
You can
think-
just be sure to state your name for the record.
Paul Lundquist, Director of Management and Administration for OCFO. We currently have 89 vacancies, which is just under 9% of our.
Okay. And
Total
what's your salary spend to date for fiscal year 2024? And what, if any, salary lapses there?
Well,
Year-to-date?
we, as we had indicated earlier, we have a hiring freeze in place with waivers.
If you
allowed
could just
certain-
either come a little
We have
closer to
a
the
hi-
mic or pull the
Yes,
mic a little
sorry.
closer.
We have a hiring freeze in place to restrict our personal services spending with waivers allowed for certain positions. We are continuing to project spending in excess of our budget and our personal services, so we do not have any salary lapse that we're projecting at this time. We have seen some downward trend in our onboard staff, and so we remain hopeful and planning and can see that our
Is
actions.
there a number associated with the 89 vacancies for this fiscal year? In terms of the amount, since they're vacant?
Well, that would be close to $9 million.
Okay.
But that's, again, that's money that's not in our budget. That's salary lapse that is not budgeted. That would be part of our budgeted salary lapse.
Okay.
Right. So in other words, in order to meet our budget, we need to have that many positions unfilled at any
Understand.
particular time. So
So are you not projecting any vacancy savings for FY 25?
We're projecting roughly the same amount, again, very roughly, in that same neighborhood.
Okay.
And since we're above that mark right now, in terms of our onboard strength, we still need to come down some to get to that sustainable level for the FY 25 budget in terms of our onboard payroll
Okay.
strength.
And where are you going to add to that, Mr. Lee?
yeah, so what 25 means is that we need to have 9% of our positions vacant in order to live within the budget. So I appreciate having balanced many, many budgets in tough financial times that we need to just determine whether or not there's actually funded vacancies. In other words, money that's freed up because of having a vacancy rate exceed your forecast. right now, it's difficult for us to manage to stay at 9%. It takes an active management strategy. Sure, if we had 12 or 15% vacancies, there's money that would be available. That's not our experience. It's
Mhm.
difficult for us to stay at the 9% level, which
What's
perhaps
your vacancy rate historically?
historically, it's been in the 3 to 4% level, but that's before COVID. I appreciate that employment markets are different now, so it's unclear with all the pressure of remote work demands from new hires and so forth. So it's difficult to say what would be the natural rate now. My guess is it'd be a little bit higher than the 3 or 4% historical rate that my colleagues said we've had over the last many years. So, but it's still substantially less than what we're budgeted for, which is to have a 9% vacancy rate. So we actively have to manage every hire to ensure we're not bringing people on too soon and therefore exceeding our budget. That can't occur.
And what is, I think the mayor, I can't remember exactly how long ago, but she announced a new remote work policy. Is your policy similar or the same as the mayor's policy in terms of how many days folks are in the office versus?
We have our, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
We have our frontline managers and executives determine what works best to meet their client demands and their work productivity. And at the moment, now the big change for our organization, of course, as you know from last year, was implementing the new financial system. And we are still stabilizing. It's going well, relatively well. There's still things that need to be improved, but I look at specific mandates for employment to be very tied to how we stabilize our financial system. That's our main tool, and people need
But is there an overarching policy though that guides?
to have our frontline managers decide what works best for the demand of to meet their service responsibilities.
So how many different units are we talking about making those types of determinations?
Probably 20 or more.
Okay.
Now,
Are you talking
have
about
a
having your
complication.
frontline managers make determinations for individual workers?
or up a level, or for a group in order, I mean, thinking about remote work really is about a group's productivity
Okay.
and when people need to be and when to cover different
Let
responsibilities.
me ask it differently then. Do
Sure.
you make any determinations about the remote work policy for any individuals or class of workers within the
I?
office?
I do not.
You do not?
I am very interested in our agency-wide approach to deciding how best to meet our needs, given our new financial system. We also have a minor complicating issue in that much of our space and a decision we neither support or detract from is being renovated.
Mhm.
So I have people that literally don't have places to go at the moment. Now so that's a complicating issue that's non-trivial, actually, as you can imagine.
Mhm.
But
So you all do not adhere to the mayor's policy more broadly for DC government, just to be clear?
No.
Okay. You reported a number of reprogrammings in FY 2023 within the agency. And it seems like it was more reprogrammings than normal. Is that a fair characterization for fiscal year 2023 in terms of reprogrammings?
Perhaps a bit more than normal, but we use our reprogramming opportunity to adjust our budget to meet our needs. Yes.
Okay. Is there any particular thing that you attribute the above average number of reprogrammings in FY 2023?
No particular trend or.
What about for fiscal year 2024? Have you reprogrammed any funds thus far in this current fiscal year?
Not thus far. We will be presenting a significant reprogramming from our non-personal services budget to our personal services budget to address that personal services spending issue that has caused us to restrict our spending there. But we will still have a need to reprogram some.
Okay. Let's talk about your CBE goals. What what was your CBE goal for FY 2022 and FY 2023? And what was your actual spend in those fiscal years?
FY '22, our CBE goal was 15.8 million. Our CBE spend was 16.4 million, and that was a percentage of completion of 103.4%.
Okay.
FY '23, our CBE goal was 14.4 million, CBE spend of 16.9 million, and so our completion percentage was 117.4%.
And what's your goal for 24? And where are you here year to date in 24 in terms of your spend?
Yes, we figure to be on track again in '24. And our goal is started at around 16 million. And we expect it to be, it's always subject to adjustment, but that's, again, the same neighborhood that we've had in the past.
Okay. I've described in my opening statement, and we've had some discussions that have alluded to the challenging financial times that the district was in terms of our budget. Obviously, the mayor proposed a budget with some revenue raisers and cuts in other areas. In giving thought to that, the committee, I've been asking agency directors about programs, initiatives within their agency that perhaps need to be revisited. In other words, are there any programs or initiatives that are currently within the OCFO's budget that are not really yielding the return on the investment, are not working as intended, whether it is a council-driven policy or otherwise? Anything that we should be looking at to reevaluate the performance?
Well, I would welcome the opportunity to assess that, but it's not going to happen in a week, I think. And more importantly, I would welcome the opportunity of using our resources to help structure that for the district, if that's what you'd like. And from my perspective, there's a couple different approaches here. First is literally with every unit in the district, whatever grouping you want to look at, can we deliver the same services for less money? And that's always controversial. It's not simple. The second is, are there program areas that are not meeting expectations as you described? All of us off the top of our head, every agency would say, well, yes, we generally are meeting our expectations, but I think what your point is a very good one. How do we think about evaluating our productivity, and where can we identify where we're just not happy with how we spend the money to achieve something? Is there a different way to achieve? And so, as we described before, our colleague agency, WMATA, has the same kinds of questions that need to be asked. And throughout the summer into the end of this calendar year, we will be engaging through the Council of Governments in that kind of assessment. So we would be happy to help structure the request. Now, as an organization myself today, I can't look at something and say, gee, we just not accomplishing what we should be, because the reality is we're working every day, we're managing our workload, we're meeting our needs. With a financial agency, you're very data-driven. We have so many checks that have to be processed. We have a payroll every 2 weeks that's profoundly data-driven. All of our tax collections are data-driven, so we can be probably relatively more specific that way than other operations, but
So yes, we love for you, I would love for you, the committee would love for you to help structure that. Not to put you on the spot, but do you have any sense of whether that's something that you can do within your existing resources, given the effort with Mamata?
we can always help. I mean, certainly structuring what the analytics would look like, yes, that,
Okay.
of course, within our own resources. We have
If you had to,
phenomenal wealth of and depth of
if you had to be put on the spot in this moment, would you say that there is any additional cost that the committee should consider in terms of trying to really administer that effort?
you know, the,
I mean, I know I'm
mean,
putting you on the
I'll
spot.
tell you
but
my attitude about that,
Sure.
quite honestly,
Please.
is that every senior executive in the district has an obligation to make time for this kind of assessment. That's my own personal opinion.
Okay.
Staff may not appreciate that, but that's the reality. Now, I know there's been talk of other kinds of groups of people evaluating district operations and their outcomes. I guess something along the lines of a tax revision commission only for expenses. That, of course, would, as soon as you create an entity, there would be expenses there. But I think these are challenging times, and we all have to be very thoughtful about what can we do to deliver the services that you all feel the citizens need at the least expense that we can.
Can you get back to the committee with, once we had opportunity to maybe talk to your team, just
Sure,
just in terms of that effort, helping to structure it,
Mhm.
what a time frame looks like,
Thank you.
and any other information that you think would be helpful to the committee as we consider that effort?
Thank you.
Okay. In terms of your capital budget, your agency has a capital budget this year with two projects, one for IT system upgrades and one for ongoing DIFS implementation. The first puts in $2 million for IT upgrades, and then there's another $5 million for DIFS, both in fiscal year 2025. Talk a little bit about how these funds are going to be used.
So for the DIF system, what this really is completion of the budget module that goes with the DIF system. So appreciate the fundamental working module, if you will, of DIFs is processing payments and recording them. In other words, the big ledger of all of our financial activity. And however, there are several other activities, financial activities, that you can use that system for to support those activities. One, primarily, critically, is the budget system. So we are in the process of implementing a budget module that is supported by DIFs. And this is the last segment of resources that are committed to that effort.
I appreciate that. And then I think it was $15 million that
Yes, sir.
is in the budget for this
This-
fiscal year. Okay.
10 this year for this project, and then 5, so it's 15 overall,
Got it.
and 5 million next year.
Okay. And then has any of the 10 for this year been spent?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Where
Yeah.
are you in terms of that spend for this fiscal year?
I don't know off the top of my head, but we're actively developing the system. Some components of that effort are embedded in the interim system we have in place for budgeting. But yes, we're actively working that project.
Okay. I don't have any additional questions at this time. A couple of areas that we're going to follow up on, including the one we just discussed about efficiencies and looking at our government across agencies and programs. So is there anything else you'd like to add to the record, though, before we
No,
move to
sir.
the next agency?
Thank you for your time. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Next, we're going to turn to the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development, or DEMPED as it's also known. DEMPED is charged with developing and executing the district's economic strategy and managing the city's portfolio of real estate development projects. This mission includes the creation and preservation of affordable housing, job creation and workforce development, and growing parts of the district's tax base. DMPED also oversees certain innovative policies and programs that help create pathways to the middle class. More recently, it is the lead agency seeking to address the reimagination and redevelopment of the district's downtown. The proposed fiscal year 2025 operating budget for DMPED is approximately $43.9 million, which represents a 5.7% decrease from fiscal year 2024 approved operating budget of approximately $46.6 million. DMPED's proposed budget is mostly comprised of local funds. The agency has budgeted for 91 full-time equivalents, or FTEs, the same as its approved FTEs in fiscal year 2024 budget. With that, I'm going to check and see if we've been joined by my colleagues. So I'm going to turn to my colleague and Ward 2 council member and also member of the committee, Brooke Pinto, for a brief opening before we turn to our government witness for testimony. Councilmember?
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Chairman McDuffie, for holding this hearing today and your partnership as we continue focusing on the economic development needs and priorities across the city. There has been a lot of focus this budget season, in particular with the deputy mayor and the mayor and the council, about the challenges that this budget presents and the many difficult choices that we're going to have to make as we face lower commercial property tax revenue and the expiration of federal pandemic relief programs. And I know that there are a lot of gaps that we are still working to fill, but I am optimistic that over the last year, we have started to make investments in the right places to ensure for the long-term financial health of our city, which I believe we have to stay focused on and we cannot take for granted as we move through this budget cycle and the next several years. Downtown, as we talk about often, is the economic engine of our city, and we rely on the tax revenue that it produces to fund really all of the other goals that we set across the district, from public education to public safety to our affordable housing initiatives. And it's really essential to the district's well-being that we invest in the short-term stabilization and the long-term vibrancy of our downtown to ensure that it continues to draw residents, visitors, and businesses from across DC, across the region, and across the world. And as we're planning for the future of a dynamic and resilient downtown, we have to continue to invest in a mixed use and residential developments and be bold and swift in our actions to stabilize and reimagine the various neighborhoods within our downtown, recognizing and harnessing the uniqueness of each one. In 2021, I introduced the Recovery Act as a comprehensive economic recovery package for our downtown and central business district. We focused on targeted investments in downtown through conversion of office to housing, but also conversions to other productive uses, retail, hospitality, entertainment uses, to support our vibrant mixed-use neighborhoods, brick and mortar grants, and safety investments. And I'm thrilled that in last year's budget, we advanced the three primary pillars of the Recovery Act: conversion of office buildings to housing, retail recovery grants, and launching the Safe Commercial Corridors program to make neighborhood-specific investments in these commercial areas. And this budget continues to advance the goals of the Recovery Act through the Downtown Activation Program, catalyzing conversions to other uses that I think is a really important part of this budget to make sure is maintained. I also appreciate the investment of $2.5 million in the proposed expansion of recovery retail grants, and the investments in vacant spaces, downtown sub-area planning initiatives for Penn West and Golden Triangle, and Downtown West are very important next steps. Lastly, Chairman, I know I'm over time. I just want to emphasize the really important work to engage Chinese residents and Chinese-owned businesses as we activate downtown, so we can enhance Chinatown's cultural presence, supporting our existing residents and drawing visitors from the region and abroad, which is really a cultural treasure that we have here in DC, and we have to do so maintaining our cultural connectivity to Chinatown. So thank you very much, Chairman McDuffie, for your partnership. And thank you, Deputy Mayor Albert, for being here today and for your leadership in championing this important vision that we need to see for the district.
And thank you, Councilmember Pinto. Before we turn to Deputy Mayor Nina Albert for testimony, it is tradition to swear in all government witnesses. So if you each could raise your right hands to be sworn in. Do you each swear or affirm on the penalty of law that the testimony you're about to provide to the Council of the District of Columbia and the Committee on Business and Economic Development is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you each very much. Good morning to you. It's good to see you. Deputy Mayor, take it away.
Good morning, Chairperson McDuffie and members of the Committee on Business and Economic Development. My name's Nina Albert, and I'm the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development. I would like to acknowledge the public witnesses who provided testimony earlier this month and thank them for their comments, feedback, and questions. I'm pleased to provide testimony today on Mayor Bowser's fiscal year 2025 budget and financial plan for DEMPED. The district's FY25 proposed budget makes significant investments in our people and our economy, despite the confluence of economic headwinds, including slower revenue growth, higher operating costs, and expiring federal funds. Despite these headwinds, by traditional economic indicators, the district's economy is experiencing positive growth. Our gross domestic product has increased, our population is growing, the city's bond rating remains AAA, and resident employment has increased. But we will start to see commercial office building valuations decrease, which in turn negatively impacts our property tax revenues. As a result, we must think boldly and creatively, as well as invest efficiently and proactively. DEMPED's budget is focused on drivers of revenue growth, as well as achieving the goals of DC's comeback plan. To start, our economy is powered by people. Within the constellation of programs that empower our residents, DEMPED continues to invest in housing stability, economic mobility, and home ownership. Increasing the supply of affordable housing and ensuring it exists in all areas of the district remains a major priority for DEMPED and a major source of pride for this city. We are over 94% of our way towards our overall goal of 36,000 new housing units in DC and 78% of our way towards our goal of 12,000 affordable units by the end of 2025. Despite making up less than 2% of the Greater Washington region's land area, DC has created 31% of the region's total new housing units, including 81% of the region's new units affordable to residents making 30% or below of family median income. Earlier this month, DEMPED also announced a second year of our unconditional cash assistance pilot program for new mothers in Ward 5, 7, and 8. And in the FY25 budget, we propose a third and final year to continuing to support these families on their upward mobility journeys. After receiving cash assistance, mothers in our Strong Families, Strong Futures program report lower stress levels, increased housing and food security, and more energy and time to spend with their children. We are thrilled that DEMPED's FY25 budget includes $1 million to continue this program for a third year. Investing in our residents also means investing in our neighborhoods and making sure that all neighborhoods, regardless of zip code, have the amenities they need for their residents to thrive, like grocery stores and retail options. In our proposed capital budget, DEMPED will invest nearly $400 million in real estate projects across the city, nearly 75% of which budget supports projects in Wards 7 and 8. Combined, these projects will deliver 5,200 new homes for DC residents, 3,000 of which will be affordable. We know what major investments can do for our communities. In the last few years, we've seen how the Wharf and its 1,000 apartments and 6,000 jobs have transformed that neighborhood. How new retail and grocery, housing and employment opportunities at Walter Reed and St. Elizabeth have expanded offerings in their communities. Our proposed investments in the 5-year capital plan will support projects like McMillan, Poplar Point, Hill East, Berry Farms, Northwest 1, Fletcher Johnson, and Park Morton, so that wards 1, 5, 6, 7, and 8 all continue to grow and thrive. In the mayor's FY25 budget, we also include investments to maintain downtown DC as the economic engine it has always been for our city. Home to 35% of our businesses and 43% of DC workers, downtown DC also accounts for 37% of the city's total property tax revenue. Our proposed investments will help reposition our central business district from being one that is currently office dominant to a mixed-use neighborhood for residents, workers, and visitors. This year, Mayor Bowser negotiated a long-term commitment to keep a key destination and anchor, the Capital One Arena in downtown DC, through 2050 at minimum. The $515 million capital investment in the renovation of the arena will generate significant revenue for our city, which will allow us to continue to invest in our communities, programs, and services. In 2023 alone, the arena generated $54 million in DC tax revenue, making it an estimated 10-year payback period on this investment. Additionally, the construction activity for the arena over the next 3 years is estimated to create over $1 billion in economic activity, $21 million in additional tax revenue, and nearly 5,000 jobs. This investment also brings clarity and confidence to the market. We are already seeing the ripple effects that this commitment is having on industry, reminding us of what we know to be true, that DC is a place to be for businesses. That is why in the FY25 budget, we are continuing our Vitality Fund with a $5 million investment and expanding our eligibility to usher in businesses that can demonstrate significant fiscal and economic impact. To date, the Vitality Fund has supported 7 projects, resulting in an estimated 616 new jobs and more than $5 million in fiscal impact. This is a 3x return on investment of the money that we have expended to date. We know that revitalizing downtown is not going to be achieved with one program alone. That's why we are proposing a new downtown activation program to complement the existing housing in downtown program by encouraging the conversion of vacant or underutilized office into new commercial uses. In addition, a new $2.5 million grant program will support pop-ups and short-term retail that will activate underutilized ground floor space downtown. We are including $500,000 to continue repositioning and reimagining 2 essential submarkets of downtown, Penn West and Golden Triangle, so that these can in the future be future hubs of innovation and entertainment, as well as home to many more residents. What separates DC from other local economies is the dedication we have shown to intentionally fostering a business environment that develops and grows our small businesses, particularly those owned by people of color and women. We have learned from business after business that they want to be in DC because they know they will get a fair shot. Since 2015, the mayor has invested in programs and initiatives to support the stability of small and local businesses, including $42 million in Great Street programs that have supported 500 businesses across the district, creating more than 2,000 jobs. And we know that small businesses tend to hire local DC residents. We continue that investment in FY25 with $7 million to support the Great Streets programs, as well as $6 million in small business programs led by the Department of Small and Local Business Development, including the Main Streets and Dream grants. To help advance the comeback plan's goals of increasing the district's share of businesses owned by people of color to 33% by 2028, the mayor's FY25 budget continues to support the Commercial Property Acquisition Fund, a program that has so far supported 21 small businesses, 90% of whom identify as minority business owners, to purchase commercial property that they otherwise would not have been able to acquire. The district's small business support goes beyond grant funding. A number of agencies across the city work tirelessly to make it easier to do business here. The mayor's FY25 budget proposes funding the Business and Entrepreneurship Support to Thrive Act, otherwise known as the BEST Act, which will make it easier and more affordable for small businesses and entrepreneurs to obtain a business license. And just last week, the Department of Buildings introduced a new pop-up permit to be issued within 15 business days for businesses to fill vacant ground floor space. This dovetails perfectly with DEMPED's proposed grant program to enable pop-ups downtown. Investing in programs coupled with improving our processes will support the business environment that is essential to the district's economic growth. The mayor's FY25 budget for DEMPED demonstrates an intentionality of investment and a commitment to our shared DC values. In a year where we are fiscally challenged, our ability to work together across agencies and with the council to lay a foundation for inclusive economic growth is paramount. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My team and I look forward to answering any questions that you may have.
And thank you for your testimony, Deputy Mayor. I do have some questions, and just for planning purposes for the members who are present, we're going to do an initial 10-minute round. I also like to note before I begin my questions that the committee's also been joined by at-large Councilmember Christina Henderson. And thank you for joining this morning, Councilmember Henderson. My first question is based on testimony that we received from a citizen during our public witness testimony hearing that we did a few weeks ago. Her name is Dolores Bouchon. She's a Ward 5 resident. She testified about a potential conservation easement for a forest patch on Queens Chapel Road. And I wanted to ask, have you been briefed at all about that? And any thoughts on her testimony?
I'm sorry, I must have, I will definitely look into that. I don't have an immediate response
Okay.
or feedback to you right
Okay,
now.
if you could follow up with the committee, we'd appreciate the response and definitely want to share that with her. I'll have a couple more questions based on public witness testimony that I'll ask throughout the course of this oversight hearing. But for now, I want to talk a little bit about the FY 2024 supplemental budget. There were a number of significant changes in the FY 2024 supplemental budget for your agency. And if you could, I'd love for you to walk me through the reductions to the Food Access Fund budget, and then also you can follow that up with the reductions to the Vitality Fund. At Performance Oversight, you indicated that the food access funding had largely been obligated because the ARPA funds, the federal ARPA funds, expire at the end of this calendar year. Has anything changed with that?
Councilmember, this is Sumangali Cook. No, nothing has changed. The funding for Food Access Fund is fully obligated at this time.
Okay. And what about just the thought behind the reductions in the budget for Food Access Fund?
There was no reduction
there
in
was
the
not.
Food Access
Okay.
Fund. It's fully obligated.
Got it. Okay. And is there funding in the FY 2025 budget?
No.
Okay. So that program is going to effectively be over once the funding is expended
Correct.
for this fiscal year. Okay. And the Vitality Fund for FY 2024 supplemental budget, was that reduced?
Did you want to go into?
Sure. Councilmember, that was reduced by, I think, about
If you could
2
just
million.
state your name for the record.
Sorry,
before you-
Ben Mendez, Deputy Chief of Staff. The Vitality Fund, I think, was reduced by about 2 million in the supplemental funds. I think this was a combination of, we were proposing this to begin on October 1st as an FY 25 enhancement. And we wanted to make sure we had the funds ready on October 1st. The ARPA funds for Vitality Fund expire December 31st. So we took a deep look on what we could expend between now and essentially October 1st.
Okay.
And that's where that reduction came in.
Okay.
This year.
But that program is going to move forward as Deputy Mayor mentioned in her opening testimony. That fund is being funded for FY 2025. And how much is being proposed?
It's 5 million for the Vitality Fund. There's also a number of changes in the BSA to expand the eligibility and also to make it a non-lapsing.
So you anticipated my next question. Talk a little bit about the proposed expansions in eligibility for the fund.
Absolutely. So the expansion is really designed to make sure that we can meet the moment in terms of what the business environment looks like. It also allows us to be more nimble as we address different industries. And so that definitely is helpful. In terms of the non-lapsing, the program is designed over a performance period, several years. And so in order to do that, we do need to have a source of funds that allows us to manage performance year over year over year. The maximum that we have right now is up to 5 years. And so in order to continue to monitor the program in terms of performance, we would like to make sure that we can, the source of our dollars are non-lapsing.
Okay.
May I just also address non-lapsing? The program has to be as flexible as possible because a business that's coming to the district, that's entertaining conversations with us are doing it in an exploratory way. And then as time goes on, when they're ready to commit, which might happen the following year, then we want to be able to know that the commitment that we made perhaps the prior year or maybe even a year and a half earlier is still available. So we just, the timeline of business decision-making is not tied to a fiscal year.
Got it. I appreciate you adding that point to the record. Just to make sure I understand back on the Food Access Fund for a moment for FY 2024, but how much remains in the fund for this fiscal year? And if you could state your name before you offer any testimony.
Councilmember, this is Curtis Lewis. I'm the AFO for MPED. I'm just looking up.
Okay, that's fine. You can take a moment. I'm a follow-up question that's sort of related while you're looking at that. Food co-ops. I'm thinking about your testimony, Deputy Mayor, about investments in Ward 7 and 8. I know it has been a priority for this committee as well, and we've had the opportunity to work with the executive on some of the initiatives, both that are council initiatives, as well as initiatives that conceived of by the executive, specifically designed to make investments in Ward 7 and 8. I know that food access, healthy food access, has been a priority for the mayor and for DEMPED. And we have annual trip to conference where we're looking at retailers and trying to promote the city and attract groceries to the city. Say all that to say, have you had any discussions on bringing a co-op grocery model towards 7 and or 8? And if so, where are those conversations today?
So right now we are exploring all different opportunities to bring more food, particularly healthy food options towards 7 and 8. We continue to work with traditional retailers and grocers and explore what their interests are. I'm not sure if we had specifically sort of outreach to a co-op, but we would very much be open to that. And frankly, at this day and age, we also know that food delivery and grocery delivery is a non-traditional bricks and mortar, something other than a bricks and mortar response, but could also be a solution. And so we continue to be open to all of those options and choices. And I don't know if we haven't had a specific exploration with the co-op, but certainly we would be open to that.
Okay. I had a conversation, and my team did, with individuals about a co-op model. I found it fairly intriguing and just something that may be worth the city exploring. Given some of the past challenges we've had with trying to attract traditional grocers to parts of our city that frankly are food deserts and need access to healthy food more than others. As I see, one grocery store after the other open up in corridors like Wisconsin Avenue and other parts of our city that has high concentrations of wealth. I think it's important that we make sure we are leaving no stone unturned, given the priority that you all have made to provide more access to healthy foods across the river in Ward 7 and 8. And so definitely would love for you all to look at that and let me know how it might be something that the city explores. And I would also encourage, because this came up in our conversation, and you all would have the expertise at your office, but there are some discussions around cross-collateralization model that could utilize business-generated in more affluent communities of the district to help support costs associated with bringing more businesses, groceries, and otherwise to areas east of the river that might not in and of itself have the incomes, density, et cetera, that normally is utilized to attract those types of retailers. So just something else to throw out there for y'all's consideration. With my remaining couple of minutes for this round, I want to move on to ask you about racial equity at DMPED. And initiatives or allocations within the agency's budget that are specifically designed to address racial or economic inequities faced by District of Columbia residents. And I'll start by mentioning Strong Families, Strong Futures, another program that was established by this committee and has been supported by the executive year over year. And we appreciate that support in implementing that program and funding it. Will the FY 2024 program assist the same number of participants?
Councilmember, the FY 23 program, the original one was $1.5 million, FY 24, and what's being requested in 25 are both at 1 million.
1 million?
Right now, Martha's Table has recertified 118 mothers of the 132 original.
Okay.
And is likely going to be adding a couple more. Some mothers have moved, but the recertification process is underway. We launched the program for year 2 just a few weeks ago with the mayor at Reunion Square. And because of the difference in the 1.5 versus the 1 million, the mothers are going to be receiving around $600 per month, a little over $600 per month.
So is the idea that the amounts are reduced, but the amount of individuals perhaps served is similar?
That's right. Our goal is to walk with the same cohort of mothers for
Okay.
the 3-year duration.
Okay. I'm gonna have some questions about the operating budget that I'll ask in my next round, but for now, I'm gonna turn to Councilmember Pinto for a round.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chairman McDuffie. So Deputy Mayor, I want to start with the downtown activation program. As I talked about in my opening statement, as part of my bill, the Recovery Act, we had incentives for conversions, not just for housing, but for other uses that we know can generate more tax dollars. And so we're particularly excited about this investment as we think about not every building is going to be a good candidate for conversion, and not every conversion building is going to be a good candidate for housing. And so as we think about the tax revenue that we could generate in otherwise vacant buildings, how are you envisioning this fund being put to best use for our downtown?
So what I think is pretty interesting and unique about the Downtown Activation Program is that what it does is hold the existing property tax assessment on a particular property at current levels for the next 15 years. So we aren't decreasing revenues that the district would be collecting. We would just be holding it at its current level for the next 15 years. What that does for an investor that wants to convert that property is that now they can underwrite their property with much more reliability because they know that that property tax revenue line item is going to stay consistent. And that just unlocks access to capital. The other thing that I think people should understand is that this conversion office is from office to other commercial use. And so per our tax code, those tax structures are the same. versus, or what is different is office to residential conversion. When you move to a residential use, the tax collected on it changes from commercial use. So we're not sacrificing anything with the downtown activation program. And I'll just use a particular example to clarify. If there were an office to hotel conversion, for example, we would maintain the existing property tax collections, but we'd also enhance our hotel tax collection. And so, and the sales tax revenue from that. I just think that it's a win-win. It's a way to what I call lubricate the market and get more conversions in the district moving so that, again, we can unlock the economic potential, the revenue potential that the district has always enjoyed prior to the rates of vacancy that we're starting to see now.
Thank you so much for that clarification. And the CFO's estimates, in my understanding, don't account for that likely increase in tax revenue that we could and will collect with these conversions. And so thank you for articulating that so we can make sure we all have that information for the record as we contemplate these important projects. I want to ask you about Farragut Park. Last year, we allocated $9.8 million across the CIP to extend and activate Farragut Square. And this proposed budget maintains that funding, but broadens the project to the historic Green Triangle improvements, which covers multiple parks. So can you share more about your vision for connectivity between the parks, but also the funds needed to activate those 3 parks themselves?
So I think if folks take a look at a map, you'll start to see a synergy between 3 parks. One is Lafayette Park, right in front of the White House. 1 block away is Farragut Square, which I call a bookend to our commercial business district, right at the in between Farragut North and Farragut West Metro stations. And then there's McPherson Square, which is only a block away. And between those 3 squares is Black Lives Matter Plaza. So when we're talking about a goal of pulling 22 million visitors from the mall and those that visit the White House into our neighborhoods so that we can maximize economic activity, really, we have 3 opportunities right at the White House to do that. It's Connecticut Avenue that connects Lafayette Park to McPherson to Farragut Square. It's down Black Lives Matter Plaza, which is a tourist attraction in and of itself. And then it's down Vermont Avenue, the 1 block between Lafayette Square to McPherson. And I Street then connects all of that north of H. So what we want to do first is do a visioning session, just like we've been doing with Gallery Place and deriving some of the best lessons learned from that experience, but bring kind of a broader look at how you activate and draw people that are already there in Washington, D.C. into our neighborhoods. So we're looking to broaden the applicability of that available set of funds that's already been appropriated. And ultimately, once we go through this design process, determine how best to distribute that $10 million or $9.8 million. I do think that Farragut Square wants to be and should be a very active and vibrant square. And so I anticipate, but again, subject to what the design process renders, that Farragut Square will get the bulk of that because it is such an important asset, particularly to our commercial district and pulling people up along Connecticut Avenue where there's retail, hotel, nightlife, and other amenities.
Okay, great. And so what I'm hearing, just to clarify, is that funding will be used both for the connectivity goals, but also to activate the square and the parks themselves.
Right. I think once we go through and see what the design process renders, we will determine how best to invest that money so that we can maximize our return and get the most out of it.
Okay, great. Thank you. So as we think about Chinatown and Gallery Place and cherishing and lifting up the existing Chinese residents Chinese American residents and Chinese-owned businesses to make sure that the Chinatown element is not lost or displaced in this growth process. How are you and your office envisioning using this budget to support legacy Chinese or Asian-owned businesses and residents in Chinatown?
Well, as you know, we have a great focus on the Gallery Place Chinatown area. And we're very sensitive to the communities that are residents there now. We are right at the beginning, frankly, of thinking through what the different options are and ways to both activate, enhance, but also preserve existing communities. In all of the work that we have done to date, well, first of all, we have reached out to the Chinese community and affiliated communities with the Chinese community in Chinatown and in DC to try and understand what the vision for Chinatown is in the future. As somebody who is personally of Asian American descent, I think that this is incredibly important to have a community that is being preserved, that is being enhanced, and that's really being celebrated. And right now, what we have is, I think, some vestiges of that, but we need to reinvest. And so we're in the design process right now. Designing things and planning things really is the time when we do deep community engagement. And so I anticipate over this next year, we will be working much more closely with the residents of that neighborhood and also bringing in businesses that really want to invest in this location so that Chinatown is not something of the past, but is something of our future.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that vision. I think not only important for the current residents who are there and the current legacy businesses who are there, but I think it's also a tourism draw and attraction to really lean into the fact that we have a Chinatown here in DC that people can come visit and celebrate. So thank you for that. And when we think about the retail recovery grants that are included here, I know we've talked about in the past some of the advantages of pop-ups and utilizing vacant space and making sure that businesses have some additional availability to funds to use these spaces. Would you be open to thinking about how we can use any of these funds to support the cultural assets we have in Chinatown?
Absolutely. The pop-up grants are really interesting because it's not exclusively for businesses. It can also be for artists. It can be for civic institutions. The pop-up grants are really designed for activation. And I think that this recommendation of specifically doing outreach and targeting opportunities for businesses, artists, community members that want to activate around the culture, Chinese culture, and Chinese community culture here in DC specifically, I think we would be really interested in.
Well, thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Look forward to continued partnership as we get many of these investments that we need to see downtown for continued expansion of our economic development focus on retaining our current businesses and attracting new businesses. And so thank you very much for your broad vision for how we can get there effectively. Appreciate it. And thank you, Chairman McDuffie.
Thank you, Councilmember Pinto. Councilmember Henderson for round.
Thank you, Councilmember McDuffie. Good morning, Deputy Mayor. I want to start asking some questions about capital projects. So I first want to start with checking in on a status update for Fletcher Johnson. I think since we last talked at Performance Oversight, we now have a new, let's say, renewed interest on a health side of seeing this project move forward as UHS is now committed to doing an emergency or standalone emergency department on that site. Where are we in terms of the contracts and the demolition?
So to answer your specific question, I'll turn it over to Esther Ezra, our Deputy Director of Real Estate and DEMPED. But before I do that, I just wanted to acknowledge and note that this is a project of significant and longstanding interest for the Ward 7 community. We are very bullish on moving this project forward, and so I'm glad that we're going to be able to provide you with a status update today.
Great.
Good morning, Councilmember Henderson. So the contracts are for the work to be done is in the works, and we anticipate that the infrastructure work is going to take about 2 years. It will involve demolition of the existing school building, which is about 300,000 square feet, significant size, and creation of some additional roads. You know, it's a very large site, 15 acres, so
Yep.
connectivity to make it more manageable with the roadway system, and some other critical infrastructure.
Okay, so you said the contracts are in the works. When you
Yes, we're
antici-
working with DGS
okay.
right now.
So the RFPs have already been put out, or?
We will follow up with you on the specifics
Okay.
of where exactly the contracts are.
Okay, I'm trying to get a determination of whether or not we're gonna have shovels in the ground by the fall.
Shovel in the ground for.
By shovel in the ground, I mean somebody tearing down that existing structure.
I got
Shovel, bulldozer, jackknife, I don't care, but I think the community is looking to see some sort of action as a
Yes.
sign of commitment.
Absolutely.
Okay. Next, I want to ask a follow-up about Capitol Gateway. We have a similar issue there of, I think, big flashy announcements a couple of years ago and still a banner coming soon, but nothing yet. Where are we on eminent domain?
The eminent domain case is still ongoing. And so it's with the courts. And until a determination is made on valuation, we are sort of waiting for that. In the meantime, though, the money in the budget is intended for support horizontal construction to get it ready. So specifically road and multimodal network connectivity, streetscape, public space improvements, and utility infrastructure upgrades.
Okay, so we're adding additional $20 million to this project in FY, well, sorry. $20 million overall, $10 million increase in FY 25, and then an additional $10 million in FY 26. Is this our hope and estimation that we will be able to start on this in FY 25?
Yes.
Okay. All right. The Berry Farm project, so there was about $58 million that was included in the budget in FY 24. We've swept all of that and moved it back into FY 25. What does this mean for the project in terms of delay?
You know, this is a phase project, so the monies that are in FY 25 are intended for infrastructure work for phase 2. And once that infrastructure work is done, it'll support vertical construction of building 3 and 4, which will each produce 125 rental units, 40 replacement units in each. That will be followed by infrastructure work for phase 2, which will be the rental flats, 122 of them with 71 replacement units. And then after that, we have the building 2 with 187 units. So final vertical construction is anticipated to be in FY 27.
Okay. Okay. I think there was just a concern there of bias taking the money out of 24. Are we essentially delaying the project further?
So I just want to be clear, we're not delaying Berry Farm. Berry Farm is moving aggressively, and actually we're really happy with the process and the progress that's being made on that project.
Okay, great. I could go through a lot more capital projects, but I'm running out of time. So I'm going to ask you about some BSA subtitles because we have a lot going on there. Okay, so Councilmember Pinto was asking a little bit about the downtown activation program. This is technical in nature, but still very important. So the subtitle defines, quote, eligible area, but then that term is not used anywhere in the subtitle. You all instead use the term downtown area. Do they have the same meaning? And was that just a typo.
Yeah, we
error?
we can adjust that so that
Okay.
it's consistent.
All right. It seems as though the way that it's written, that after a property is selected, there's going to be a certification process by the mayor for the building to receive the temporary freeze. Is that accurate in terms of process?
That's correct. And that's consistent with how we evaluate tax abatement projects that come in our door, or even the housing in downtown regulations that we're processing right now.
Okay.
applications.
How long do you anticipate it will take to establish rules or regs?
Well, the typical rules and regulations process is anywhere between 6 to 9 months. So if this were, and we hope that it will be approved in this budget process, then we would begin immediately.
Okay. Are there other jurisdictions who've done this sort of thing before
I'm
in
not,
terms of the tax freeze?
I'm not aware of, well, that's a good question. I'm not aware of any right off the top of my head.
Okay.
I'll tell you, this proposal is a collaboration between DEMPED and some property owners who I think are very thoughtful as well as creative in terms of how to preserve the district's tax base and not erode it any further, but still provide some stability and investment-focused solutions to, again, attract investors.
Okay. Look, I'm okay with be a pioneer. I guess my question, I'm sort of thinking about what happens once the tax freeze period is over. Do you have businesses who are now threatening to abandon that particular area because of that, X, Y, or Z? But
I think, so typically what would in my experience, what happens when you do any kind of freeze, you need to phase back in. So let's say over the course of the next 15 years, property taxes rise dramatically. And what you would want to do is sort of smooth out or have kind of a stepped up process to getting that property from what its current rate is that's been frozen for the next 15 years and to what the new property tax assessment rate would be. But these types of issues would be negotiated and determined over the course of the rules and regulation process.
Okay. And in terms of the estimate in numbers for the dollar amounts, 6 million in FY 27, 7 million in 28, 8 in 29, and then 20 in FY 30. How'd you guys get those numbers?
We estimated I mean, it takes 2 to 3 years for a property to both design and finance a project. So we estimated based on number of buildings that we thought could actually take advantage of it in the next 3 to 4 years. So honestly, it's a modest estimation and we'll adjust as we get better feedback from the marketplace.
Okay. I want to ask about the World Pride grants. I saw a World Pride flyer. I want to know where they got the DC skyline from on this seemingly AI generated document, but which agency is going to be responsible for awarding those grants?
So that will be directly out of the office of the mayor.
Okay, but which office?
So
There's a lot of offices. I mean, EOM itself is not a grant-making entity. So is it?
we'll have to get
LGBTQ
back
affairs?
with you
Okay.
on that. We'll have to get back.
Obviously, with Pride coming up and the anticipation of World Pride in 2024, there's some concerns in terms of we want to get this right. We want to make sure that we have all the things going on. Would there be any strings or expectations for this money?
Well, it would need to comply with the district's grant authorities and requirements. So insurance, just a whole number of different things that would be consistent. I don't think that there would be a difference in how we apply these grants dollars to other grant dollars.
Okay, I'm over my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. Deputy Mayor, the budget for your office continues to decline from the height of the pandemic. And for FY 2025 proposed, it's approximately $44 million, which is down about $2.7 million from this current fiscal year. I'm just curious as whether or not you all are looking at a more sort of stable plateau for funding of the agency now that all the pandemic federal funds have been rolled off your budget.
Well, right now, I feel confident in the levels that we're being funded at in FY '25. As we know, we have to pivot over the next year and we'll reassess for FY '26. But at this moment, I think that the budget as proposed will allow us to do the work that we have to do.
Okay, and I ask in part because, you know, as you're dealing with a shrinking budget and staffing, when I think arguably the city's calling on you, the mayor's calling on your office to do more work. There's a significant focus on downtown, but also a focus on other areas of the city, and we'll get to that later. I have some questions about that, but just your thoughts about how you're managing the resources within your office, given all that you're doing with the various plans and proposals that you're dealing with at DIPED.
Well, first of all, there's always just kind of natural turnover and attrition and replacement of talent. And so as the needs of the office are evolving, for example, we've talked about business development and that function and how important that is in the coming year. And that, reassessing our real estate portfolio. So as positions are available, we reassess what the areas of greatest need are and are able to reappropriate as necessary. But right now, I think that we have defended the positions that we have. I believe that we can deliver the agenda that's before us. And I think that the budget levels that we've proposed in the FY '25 budget will allow us to achieve what we need to in the coming year.
Okay. And it's 91 FTEs proposed for '25, which is the current level of FTEs for this current fiscal year?
Correct.
Okay, and how many vacancies does your office currently have?
We currently have 3 real vacancies. We expect to fill those within this quarter.
Okay, and I think the information that we received on the Schedule A, which was, admittedly some time ago when we offered the pre-hearing questions, was 5. So have you hired 2 positions in between the time that you?
We have. There are folks joining the team as early as next week.
Okay, what positions have you hired for, and what are the 3 vacancies that exist today?
The 3 vacancies are the legislative director, a program analyst position, the real estate team, and I think a business development specialist.
Okay, and which 2 positions are you hired for? Have you hired for?
We have 2 folks starting next week on the real estate team as development managers.
Okay. All right. And how much is allocated for the positions that are currently vacant? Well, let me ask differently. Vacancy savings for FY 2024, approximately.
The vacancy savings for FY 2024 are about $690,000.
690,000?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for that. Let me ask you about a couple of items in the budget that appear to be proposed for cuts. Contractual services is the first that I'd love for you to shed a little light on. And then second, the budget proposes to cut government subsidies and grants. Talk about what those line items typically include and what's going to be cut if the
Okay,
budget is passed.
Councilmember, you're referring to Table 3 in the budget book?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So in contractual services, there's 317,000 in a reduction to that. That's mainly $162,000 reduction to the new communities contracts. And then there are several other smaller reductions throughout the budget that represent the balance of that cut.
Mm. I'm sorry, if you could repeat the second part. I heard the first part about new communities and contractual services.
Right, and so then there are other items throughout the budget, you know, the smaller items that are cut, so impact modeling for 46,000, you know, we have transcription services being cut, temporary personnel, Davis Bacon, so there are several smaller cuts that make the balance to 317.
Okay.
And so you'd like me to speak on subsidies and transfers?
If you could briefly.
Okay, so, you know, typically subsidies and transfers are where all the grant funds live, all the one-times, all the enhancements, right? So, you know, we have a net change, and, you know, we had 21 million in one-time reductions, we had 20 million in enhancements. That net is about 1.4 million, right? And then we have, and then there is an additional 1 million that adds to the 2.4.
Got it. Got it. Thank you for that explanation. Just getting back to staffing briefly, Deputy Mayor, do you feel like you adequately have the staffing necessary to fulfill the priorities that have been outlined in the budget? I don't want to harp on it, but I do want to make sure that as we think about everything that is in store, the ongoing efforts, that the staffing levels are adequate for your office.
You're never going to ask an agency director if they need more staff and not get the answer that they do. So I will not.
Still got to ask the question.
I will not defy logic.
Okay.
However, having said that, we are in constrained times, which calls for some discipline. And so I know that you have to, the Office of the Deputy Mayor works in partnership with a lot of organizations. So we have to have adequate staff to manage the functions that only the government can execute on. And I believe that the staffing levels that we have are adequate. But we do have an increased workload. That means that we will be working with partners more aggressively and more collaboratively. The business improvement districts are a type of partner. The Washington, DC Economic Partnership, Destination DC, Events DC. There's a number of organizations that we have very close ties to and who will help us deliver this load. And I'll just use the example of the Gallery Place Task Force, where the private sector, led by Jody McLean and Debbie Ratner-Salzberg, have given their own time, as well as many others who are on the task force, to contribute to the effort. And so those types of partnerships, collaborations are what are going to allow us to get the job done.
Okay. And your grants attachment, I know there's approximately $914,000 slated for St. Elizabeth's spending on the RISE Center operations and maintenance services and owner rep services. Just talk about if are those a little bit about what we can expect in the future for the RISE Center and what kinds of changes, if any, are planned for it.
So just in general, St. Elizabeth's campus requires ongoing maintenance and operations. So there is no bid in place. There's no master developer in place. So DemPed right now is serving that function, which is what that budget is used for. As for the RISE Center, let me see if Esther has an update. If not, we can get back to you.
Okay.
Okay, we will get back to you.
Okay. Also note in the budget, approximately $415,000 for new communities contracts on community engagement, human capital planning, et cetera. How does that spending shift with development partners who are engaged on individual projects? Do they assume any of those costs directly? How's that broken down? And can you share that information with the committee. I know Ms. Lewis just alluded to new communities in one area of the budget as well.
Okay, so new communities is also very similar. Our budget is to support the human capital side of new communities. As you know, there's construction moving forward. That's accounted for in our capital dollars, but on the operating budget side, it's really to support our human capital needs. I'll see if we have a line-by-line breakdown.
I'm not asking for the line-by-line
Okay.
breakdown unless, I mean, if you have it, you can follow up with the committee on that. I'm sort of curious as to just because we had some testimony about it as well. How's it going generally, new communities?
I think it's now we're in a very different position than we were some time ago as a result of DemPed helping and supporting the housing authority and making sure that this money gets moved. We are now at a stage in almost all of our new communities projects where we are under development. In many, some of the projects, the phases have been built and closed, and we're now in that last push to get the capital dollars out so that projects can be built.
Let's take a minute. I know you responded to Councilmember Henderson's questions about Berry Farm, but let's, if you could, brief update on the other new communities projects.
Hello, Councilmember McDuffie. So on, let's say Northwest 1, Phase 1 is complete. Phase 2 is under construction. Phase 3 under the LDA is required to close by FY '27. We are anticipating that that will happen sooner.
Okay.
Which is one of the reasons why there's money in the budget for sooner years than that. In terms of Park Morton, the first phase has the vertical construction on the first phase commenced on December 2022 and expected to be completed this summer. And phase 2 demo and infrastructure work is expected to commence this summer as well. And vertical construction is anticipated to start in 2025.
And just to be clear, phase 2 includes what sites?
Park Morton itself, on
Okay,
site,
on site.
not Bruce Monroe.
I was going to ask as a follow-up about Bruce Monroe and just the status of that.
So, as you know, it is right now in markup, and so that'll sort of determine the timing. But we anticipate that construction will start around Q2 2025, maybe Q3, and we anticipate completion by FY '27.
Okay. CBE spend, talk about what your goals were for FY '22 and '23 and where you ended up on your actual spend for those 2 fiscal years.
Councilmember, we can track down the numbers. I know that we had a preliminary spend figure in '23 that final numbers are being calculated after the ACFR is being closed, but DemPed has hit and met CBE goals every year. For 2024, our current goal is 4.46 million.
Okay. I'm kind of curious to get the actual numbers for the 2 fiscal years as well, just to see historically whether or not you all are in the same ballpark in terms of what your goal are, what your goals have been and what your spends are. So y'all don't have the numbers right now?
Off the top of my head, I know we met the 23 goal by about 103%, but I can get you the dollar
Okay.
amount there.
Where's the 23 goal relative to the 22 goal?
We can check on that. I know
Okay.
that those goals should be similar in nature, just depending on the size of our budget. This
Okay.
year's number has decreased because of our budget in '24 is different.
Okay,
It was around 4.4 million for CBE spend.
got it. Okay. Question that I've asked the agencies and budget oversight, given some of the fiscal constraints that the city is facing with this particular budget and moving forward, is about existing programs, initiatives that should be curtailed or eliminated. And I'm curious as whether or not DemPed is engaged in any process to evaluate existing programs, perhaps programs that can be administered in the same way, or at least consistent in the same program, but with a smaller budget, or areas where we just aren't seeing the outcomes that we had intended when these programs were put in place, either executive initiated or council mandated.
In this budget, we have not made drastic or moves like that. Our goal is pretty broad reaching, wanting to support and promote the growth of small businesses and investment in small businesses across all 8 wards, in households, and also in housing production, and then and obviously in downtown and other neighborhood revitalization projects. So we've not really taken the gas off of any of the programs. Where I think there's real opportunity to get bigger bang for the buck is in process improvement. So within DemPed, we did something this year, thanks to Ms. Cook's efforts, which is to offer all of our grants at one time so that small businesses could see what was available to them all at once and decide which programs or which combination of programs was going to support their work the most and the best. That alleviates efforts on our part as a manager of these various programs, as well as improves the cost equation to small businesses that are applying. The BEST Act is another example of that, where we're enhancing and funding the requirements of the BEST Act so that there can be savings in the long term. The pop-up programs and Department of Buildings 15-day turnaround for pop-ups, all of these programs are new, in fact. We're not taking away existing programs. We're trying to improve and enhance the processing of existing programs so that they go farther, and that the new programs that we're proposing are ones that ultimately should be helping us save money and helping the business community save money.
I want to acknowledge, some of the enhancements that, and they're mostly one-time enhancements for FY25, but they are enhancements nonetheless, including $7 million for Great Streets, $5 million for the Vitality Fund, $2.5 million for retail activations, $2.5 million for the Commercial Property Acquisition Fund, $1 million, as we already discussed, for Strong Families, Strong Futures. And so I'm glad to see the ongoing support for these programs. You talked about Strong Families, Strong Futures, but I do want to give you an opportunity to talk about some of the other programs, specifically the successes that the agency has seen in those programs over the past year or so that should give the committee and others some confidence in continuing to invest in them. I think the Vitality Fund is one of the more popular programs that we've heard referenced when it comes to downtown, to business attraction. So talk a little bit about some of the successes specifically with those programs.
I'm going to turn this over to Director Cook, but the first thing that I just want to lead with is, the investments that the city makes in economic development represents about 2% of our overall operating budget. The money that we spend, we measure our success based on return on investment. So every public dollar that we put in has to derive an X-fold number of dollars back to the district. And so I'm a big believer, obviously, just because of the charge that I have, that investment in economic development is about generating additional or multifold return to the district. And so I'll turn it over to Director Cook to share some of those successes.
Sure. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. What's exciting is, as you've spoken about some of the enhancements that are in the budget for 25, particularly with Vitality Fund. I think you heard the Deputy Mayor mention in her testimony the 7 that have been awarded Vitality Fund incentive dollars, which is generating 616 jobs and leasing over 160,000 square feet of space, but also what's in the queue as well as we are looking to review and bring on and onboard others. We have 17 additional applicants that we're looking at, trying to review, and with the hopes that as we continue to deepen our engagement with those prospects, that we'll see and bear more fruit and harvest additional new attractions. In the queue right now with those 17, there are 170, 1,700 estimated new jobs from what we have in 600 square feet of space that could potentially be leased, with an estimated $34 million in fiscal impact just with the 17 alone in Vitality Funds. So we definitely are seeing a lot of ramp up and excitement thanks to our partners. As the Deputy Mayor mentioned, we don't do this by ourselves. The Washington, D.C. Economic Partnership plays a role, the brokers, the site selectors, and lots of other private partners that help and play as ambassadors to connect us and refer employers to us. So very excited about that. Commercial Property Acquisition Fund, as you know, Chairperson, that this is something that has also been equally as exciting. 21 businesses have been awarded and the opportunity to close on their businesses. This year, it was increased to 6 million. So we're expecting to see anywhere from 12 to 14 new, employer-owned businesses acquire their own space. So very excited about that. And the fact that it is still in the budget and is recommended in the budget for 2025. As we talked about some of the others, Great Streets, which includes Neighborhood Prosperity Fund and Locally Made, those continue to thrive as they have thrived in past years. Very excited that they are being maintained. We will continue to make sure that we are refining and supporting these programs and investing in the kinds of businesses that are going to support the district. It also includes even our Ward 2 expansion as well. And so we're excited to continue to modify and enhance as we continue to move through each year. We do a lot of post conversations and wrap ups to understand what is necessary so we can continue to focus what that investment looks like each year. So excited to see what will take place in 2025. Currently, all of these programs that we talked about are active and under review. So looking forward to sharing more where we are once we begin to do some awards.
Thank you for that helpful information. I want to just sort of stand along those lines around grants. Are there any grants that, it's the best way to put this, I guess, have been awarded but have not yet been dispersed from fiscal year 2023? Anything outstanding?
Fantastic question. Actually, all of our awards, all of our recipients that are current grantees, the disbursements happen in 1 to 3 different tranches.
Mhm.
So no particular competitive process or grant program that we have, you get the full disbursement up front. So it's broken into tranches. So every recipient from the previous year has received at least 1 or 2 tranches, but that's over a period of performance that is being monitored as they are, expending their funds. They receive other tranches.
Okay, we may follow up. I'd be curious to just sort of see a breakdown
Sure.
On that, if you can follow with the committee.
Okay.
Just
Sure.
to see how that is working out.
Sure.
And then I had oversight, was it yesterday? It's all a blur. I think it was yesterday with Commissioner Woods in Department of Insurance, Securities and Banking. And we know that they have received funding from the Treasury Department that I believe is split between their agency and DMPED. Just any updates on where things are? How much did DMPED receive from the Treasury Department? And I believe that's coming in tranches too. And have you put it out? Have you gotten applications, anything awarded? If you can just give some updates around that.
Sure. Sure. As you mentioned, Commissioner Woods talked about the dollars from Treasury. The total is 62 million and it has been split. We receive 26 million of that split. And as you alluded to, there is tranches that the Treasury is planning to do. We will receive in the first tranche 8 million and change for that. Currently, the status right now, if you recall from our previous testimonies, we were working on a fund-to-fund model, which means that we need to first identify a program administrator. That was the first step. And then through that program administrator, design an RFP to search for funders themselves. And thereby through those funders, they would then work with those startups that we've identified that we want to invest in the districts. So at this time right now, we have identified a program administrator. So step one is done. And so now as we are working through that grant process and executing their grant agreement, we are also mining what does the RFP look like as we put out as that program administrator puts out the solicitation for fund managers.
Okay,
So we're expecting that we will be able to put out an announcement to startups probably in mid to late summer, but that's the goal right now.
okay. And just so I understand, so the program administrator is specifically going to be brought on board to do what?
They're managing the fund managers.
Okay,
We expect to have anywhere from 5 to 7 fund managers that
Okay.
then get a tranche of money that they will then invest in those small
Ah,
businesses.
got it.
Mhm.
Okay. And just in terms of time frame, you may have already mentioned, but if you, like, what's the time frame?
We're anticipating that once we onboard fund managers, and they'll be doing that on a rolling basis, they all won't get, identified in the next, 90 days, but
Sure.
that'll be on a rolling basis. But we anticipate we'll be able to begin to open up applications for small businesses, for startups, probably by mid to late summer.
Got it. And you anticipate having fund managers sort of on board by when?
Onboarding them on a rolling basis within the next 90 to,
Okay.
at least the next 3 to 4 months.
And generally speaking, what kind of interest have you gotten about this type of program? It seems like it's something that would.
Yeah, actually
Like,
quite a lot. Literally since last year, it's been an ongoing conversation with VCs that we've talked to, existing partners
Mhm.
that we work with as well. In addition to some of our CDFIs who love to participate and be partners or identify startups as well that they're working with too. So we've gotten a lot of interest from the community all over.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that.
Sure.
Let me turn to some questions about your capital budget. There's actually, before we do that, I was on your website not too long ago and wanted to ask about the dashboard. Just the thinking about the dashboard on some of the outcomes. I know that there've been some regular updates on the 36,000 by 2025. But I also noticed that some of the other updates are a few years old. What's the status of the dashboard and the plans around updates, if any?
Thank you, Councilmember. We are actively updating that economic intelligence dashboard.
Mhm.
We're putting some things together that both allow us to track some of the macro indicators for the DC government, but also for DC economy, but also where we are on track with our comeback plan goals. I think we reported out on that last time, but that's kind of what's in the mix now. We also kind of work alongside a couple of other economic intelligence facing dashboards in the district. One is OP's state data center that has a lot of information on demographics, population, income,
Yep.
but also OCFO's monthly revenue reports
I was going to ask about that.
that
'cause-
generate a lot of the same information.
Yes.
So we're trying not to be duplicative there.
Yeah, yeah, okay. All right, well, I'm glad that you're on that. Do you have a sense of when you all plan to do that? Because the updates are coming out pretty regularly from OCFO.
We're in the process. We're trying to make sure that we are being thoughtful in how it connects with the work of the DEMPED cluster, but also the goals that we talked about. So, probably in the next several months here.
Okay.
Councilmember, you had asked quickly, just to correct the record on CBE spend, if I
Mhm.
had that for you.
Yeah,
2022, the goal was around 13.8 million.
13.8 million?
DEMPED spent 14.3, so it's about 103% of that.
Okay,
This year we have spent, in 2023, DEMPED spent 13.2 million with CBEs.
was
And
that the goal or was that the
that was
thing?
the actual. There are still exceptions being generated now in the process. We're still waiting to see what that looks like.
Oh,
And I
okay. I
mentioned
thought the administration had finished with the,
the ACFR.
yeah, well, no, I mean, the ACFR, yeah, but the going back and looking at the exceptions and kind of reconciling for 2023.
My
No?
understanding is that that's still in process. And FY24's goal is about 4.46.
Okay, so significantly reduced. What's your sense of why it's such a lower goal for 2024?
The DEMPED operating budget was significantly reduced between
Okay.
23 and 24, and then the
Got it.
types of funding also.
Okay. Increases in your capital budget, almost $400 million, and most of that is tied to the monumental deal, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and There are some capital projects I want to ask about beyond the ones I've already asked about. Let's start with the Chinatown Revitalization Fund, and I know you had a lot of inquiry from Ward 2 Councilmember Pinto. But this is the current vehicle for the Monumental Capital One Arena renovation funds, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Where are you with the negotiations on the term sheet, just generally speaking?
They're going very well. We've been working through a number of different issues. We've been prioritizing operational issues, which was a really important concern to Monumental Sports, for example, traffic management and control. And so, and a parking plan. So we've been working on that. And right now, sort of the next phase, the next two priorities are really to negotiate the development financing agreement, because that's just of interest to everybody. And then the other set of priorities is really the design process and making sure that the design concepts that the team has are things that we can accommodate. And we just really want to make sure that the arena going forward in the future isn't a large blank wall on four sides, but instead activated and relates to the street and really contributes to vibrancy out on the street. So those are what are on the horizon. But we are very actively engaged, meeting with them multiple times a week.
Okay. And do you have a sense of just what the timeline might look like before the council sees something?
We can, an update of how things are going. We can provide one at any time.
Okay. All right. I look forward to getting an update on that. How's it working, sort of the coordination on some of these things? I know a number of things that have touched on in the term sheet that we reviewed hit on areas that are tied to economic development, but technically I think fall outside your cluster. Public safety, for example, energy. Talk about how that coordination is going within the government.
So very well. I mean, you know, the advantage of working, you know, in this administration is that I've got great colleagues in the public safety sphere, great colleagues in operations and infrastructure. So within DEMPED, we have two project managers that are working on this. They're co-led by somebody who has real estate transactional experience and public finance experience on one hand, the other person who is reaching across, collaborating with other agencies such as DDOT, the entire MPD and other public safety apparatus and agencies, HCMA, for example. So that person reaches out as needed, for example, on the traffic or what's called an IAP, an incident action plan, which touches, I think, 6 to 7 agencies. So they'll call meetings and all the agencies that need to be at the table are at the table. My mantra is always make sure that you have the right people at the table when you're making decisions. And so that's how we're operating, and everybody is incredibly supportive and reacting quickly.
Okay. Talk about the downtown action plan. I know a number of the items that are included in the action plan are also contemplated in the mayor's proposed budget with specific funding. But I'd be curious just to hear your thoughts about how DEMPED is approaching the work for some of the future years.
Sure. So as we know, the Downtown Action Plan was a collaboration between the Downtown DC bid, the Golden Triangle bid, DEMPED, and also the Federal City Council. And there were a large number of recommendations. Some of them are operational in nature, others are investments. There are a whole variety of parties, whether they're the private sector or the public sector, that need to be involved. So what we did was triage those set of recommendations, identified which of those we are already doing, and taking credit for that. There's also a number of investments that coincide with what DEMPED had already identified and DDOT had already identified, and the Office of Planning's Public Realm Plan had already suggested. And so where there was consensus generated between the Downtown Action Plan, the Public Realm Plan, and our own infrastructure priorities. That's what we are proposing in the FY25 budget. I think that everybody is very focused on activations, near-term solutions that can continue to drive interest and business to downtown. That's one set of budget requests. So the pop-ups, that's an example of that. The Festival Fund is another example of that, making sure that there's vibrancy today, now, in this year, generating money and revenue to the district. And then there are key infrastructure investments, for example, along I Street in Farragut Park, that are physical enhancements that indicate to the market that we are maximizing use of our existing assets so that we can attract residents. Green space is incredibly important to residents. It's also incredibly important to our energy and water absorption and infrastructure and ecosystem. And then the last I'll talk about is transportation. We have had a number of different reconciliations that need to happen on the transportation front so that pedestrian safety, motorized vehicle safety are at the forefront. And so we've done a lot of study over the years as to how to manage and how to accommodate transit, public personal vehicles and pedestrians and bikes. But now we've suggested $1 million to reconcile these plans so that for the downtown, where there is the largest density of people and businesses, that all of that, that the transportation network supports the activities of all of those stakeholders. And then lastly, we're also putting money and requesting money for planning, because we know now we're going to have to make a shift in how we think about the physical space and the mix of uses downtown. And that's why we're also requesting planning dollars.
I appreciate the detail in that response. I want to, and not to speak in reference to my question about downtown. Downtown is top of mind for me. It's top of mind for you. It's top of mind for a host of people for good reason. It has been the last several decades, the economic engine really undergirding the District of Columbia's budget. It's also top of mind because of some of the challenges associated with commercial office. I talked about it with the chief financial officer earlier. But I also think it's important to give you an opportunity, and I want to recognize that we've been joined by Ward 5 Councilmember Zachary Parker. I'll turn to Councilmember Parker for a round in a moment. I also want to recognize that there are areas of the city that are looking for investment outside of downtown, along neighborhoods across District of Columbia, in all 8 wards, particularly in wards 5, 7, and 8. And I know that there are things that are proposed. In fact, I was just with the mayor this week. I tell you, it's all a blur during the budget process. I think it was on Monday along Rhode Island Avenue to talk about robust retail. But I want to give you an opportunity before I transition to Councilmember Parker to talk about the sort of investments, the proposed spending and funding for corridors within the wards outside of downtown, particularly in areas that have been long waiting for increased investment. It came up in some of the witness testimony we got during our public witness hearing, and it came from people like Alex Baca and Commissioner Jamila White and others. So take an opportunity to talk about that for a moment, please.
Well, I am really grateful that you are asking this question. I think it's incredibly important to make 2 clear points. The investments that we're making in downtown are about investing in our entire city. When the downtown economic engine is working, what it does is it provides us with revenue that we can then disperse to a variety of different needs throughout the city. And so having that primary muscle work really healthily and fully is important to the functioning of the entire business ecosystem, as well as our housing and jobs development ecosystem. But the other thing I want to talk about is this investment in the Capital One Arena. I get this question all the time. It's a huge number, $515 million. It's coming from our capital budget. I want to compare that to the capital investments that we're making in the rest of the city, which equals in total $400 million. I think it's a tremendous balance, actually, of in our capital budget, which is not our operating budget, two very different budgets, which is the capital budget is investment in district-owned property. So even in the capital budget, even though the number is big for the Capital One Arena, it actually is in the same order of magnitude as to what we are investing in the rest of the city, primarily in Ward 7 and 8. That's where that $400 million, a majority of that money is going to.
And
So-
Ward 5 money too, right?
And Ward 5 money as well, and Ward 1 money, and Ward 6 money. So I just want to underscore that there is balance. In terms of operating dollars and where we're investing, we actually are investing more outside of downtown than we are in downtown because historically, we've not needed to invest in downtown. And so right now, what we're proposing in this budget is restoring at a greater level the investment in great streets, in main streets. The great streets and main streets are outside of downtown. And we've had great success. And that was the event that we were all at on Monday and got to hear about new businesses, small and local owned businesses that are expanding and growing in their neighborhoods. Those proprietors are choosing to live in their neighborhood. We've met a couple of Brookland and Woodridge residents and Eckington residents that day who have chosen Rhode Island Avenue as the home for their business. Those are success stories we want to keep doubling down on. But in this budget, we talk about downtown because we've not historically had to invest to promote and support small business growth in downtown. And as for the Vitality Fund, our future as a city is to continue to attract what I call high growth businesses that want access to our high skilled talent. And those are the leading edge, the cutting edge businesses in innovation. There's an opportunity in AI and cyber. We've heard repeatedly that that's where the marketplace is going. They want to be in Washington, D.C. Because we have great talent here in D.C. And so we want to make sure that we are in the future investing in job development and skill development so that residents of the DC of the District of Columbia can get access to those high growth jobs.
All right. And I'm glad you ended on that note. I think it's important note to end that response on. So to make sure that residents can get access to those jobs and more broadly, existing residents get access to opportunities both today and the opportunities that arise as a result of the investments that the city is making so that we see an increased future prosperity. And so I know when I think you all at the Mayor Council breakfast some months ago, I referenced the effort of former Mayor Williams to focus on economic development, to really focus on trying to grow our economy. And I think was successful in terms of seeing the prosperity increase in the district over the last several decades. But I think there's always a lingering question about what it means for existing residents when you plan in that way. And one of the questions that he posed later on upon reflection was, have we worked out a way to both grow the city and make it work for everyone? And that's just a question that I keep in my head as I think about the work that we're doing in the city, particularly my role as chair of the Committee on Business and Economic Development, because ultimately the things that we do need to work for everyone, particularly those folks who have the greatest needs. So I'll stop there, turn to Councilmember Parker for a 10-minute round.
Good to see you again, Deputy Mayor, and thank you all for being here. I want to just echo this push for development across our cities, which I know you're committed to, Deputy Mayor. I've been in continued conversations about investment along the Rhode Island Avenue corridor. That is something I will continue to push on, and looking in this year's budget to see how we can work with your office, the Office of Planning, to dedicate funds to get the ball rolling there, because I take to heart what you said at the mayor's budget, or no, it was the mayor and council budget several months ago. It's all a blur at this point. That the areas of the city where we see a hybrid of residential, commercial, recreational outlets are faring better and will continue to fare better than the downtown corridor, where it's primarily commercial real estate. So with that in mind, I wanted to come to the monumental sports deal, and I know some of these questions may have been touched on before I got here, but for the record, where are we with negotiations with monumental sports? Specifically, where's the clock in terms of coming up with a ratified agreement? I recall when the deal was struck and there was fanfare, we were told there would be about 120 to 180 days before there would be a ratified contract. Where are we today?
So right now, we're still working on what I call the due diligence or the technical evaluation of exactly what they're building, and some of the operational concerns that they brought up and that we agreed to in the term sheet. So, for example, we've already produced a draft IAP, which is, now I forgot what the I is, but action plan. Incident action plan. We've also already or are producing a traffic operations and parking plan. So those aren't agreements, but those are documents that start to capture what services the city is going to provide around events of a certain scale and size. So those are underway and already in draft. The things that are coming up are the development finance agreement and then an amendment to the ground lease. In order to produce those documents, we just need more information about what their construction schedule is and what their design and development plans are. And so we are working on those. We've already started to identify opportunities to amend and restate basically a 20-year-old lease so that there's clarity and applicability for the next 25 years. So everything is in process. We are moving forward very quickly. I think, in fact, I feel very confident in stating the Monumental Sports is satisfied and happy with the pace at which we are advancing these issues. I am not sure that we will have complete documents in 120 days because the design process will take longer than that. But I am positive that we will have identified all of the issues that need to go into these documents and be captured within 120 days.
Got it. So for clarification, when might we expect a ratified contract, like a signed deal? And I know we have a tentative agreement, but like something ironclad that lawyers say this is a binding commitment. And I know can you give me a window of time? Is it likely this year? Are we looking sometime next year?
No, we're looking this year.
This year.
Yeah.
Okay, by the end of this year. All right, likely by the end of this fiscal year, which would be by the end of September.
We're definitely aiming for that. Everything's always subject to negotiations once you start opening up. I think the ground lease is a 150-page document, for example.
Okay. Is there any update that you can provide about the feasibility of Gallery Place serving as the future site of Monumental Sports' practice facility?
There's been some preliminary exploration and it's ongoing. Look, anything is feasible. It's just whether or not it's affordable. And so at this moment, I do not believe that Monumental Sports or we believe that it is affordable to do. And so we have in the term sheet an agreement that if the Gallery Place property is not feasible or affordable, that we would have 18 months to work with Monumental Sports on a new practice facility location. If we can't find one within 18 months, then we will continue to operate their practice facility out of the entertainment and sports arena.
And have you
St.
already
Elizabeth's.
started surveying potential sites of district-owned land?
We've started to look, but not in earnest. We're addressing other priorities first, particularly since we have 18 months to
Understood.
look. So we're dealing with right now. What's really important to us is to make sure that we have the development finance agreement. Monumental Sports is looking into all of the operating costs and operating agreement that we have with Events DC for the entertainment and sports arena and kind of how to maximize opportunities there. And then dealing with the operational concerns of large events currently.
Understood. I will just say for the record, and I said this to you privately, we would love the practice facility in Ward 5. There's a great opportunity in the Union Market area as well as others tucked between Gallaudet and Kip High School. That is district-owned land that is underutilized, and I think it would be a great opportunity. Last question on monumental sports. Have you been able to ascertain whether or not PLAs apply to this monumental sports deal? And I will say, this has been the question that I have yet to get a clear answer on. I've asked our general counsel, I've asked the Attorney General's team, I've asked different mayoral team members, and it seems like there's a lot of ambiguity whether or not a PLA applies.
So I'm glad that you asked this question. I've had our general counsel look into this as well. It does not appear that a PLA would apply per the current law. I would like an opportunity for our general counsel to speak with the council's counsel and make sure that that's correct, but that's our current assumption. I want to explain why that is. It's very, right now, the way that these kinds of deals are structured, the district would issue bonds. We would transfer that money per the development finance agreement to a private party. Right now, district law does not require a third party, a private party, to enter into a PLA. That has not been the district's practice historically. I'm not sure that we want to mandate that going forward, candidly. So that's where we stand at this moment, but I would like to verify all that information.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to switch gears. I was just with you yesterday for the celebration at the NOMA BID, which does great work in parts of Ward 5. And you mentioned something that I think was really important. The work downtown is vital, but it will take many years for us to accomplish. In the short term, though, we can pivot with tourism to help maintain the district's tax revenues. I note that there is a federal grant DMPED is receiving of roughly $1 million. One question is, how is DMPED thinking about using that grant towards tourism, or where should I be looking for how that grant is being used? And then what other investments in the proposed fiscal year 25 budget would speak to how we're thinking about pivoting on tourism?
So I'll open it up and then I'll turn it over to Director Cook. So first of all, I want to make sure that the characterization of what's going on in our economy is clear. Where we're seeing strength and continued resilience in the commercial, it's really in the commercial office marketplace. Because that's what our revenues are generated from, is property tax revenue. So the economy is good. Business activity is good. It's the office market that we are keeping a strong eye on. So there is both a trend that is what we call a flight to quality. So trophy office space, Class A++ office space, that's where businesses are prioritizing moving to. And so the newer submarkets like the Wharf, like Navy Yard, like Union Market, like NOMA tend to be stronger because they have more modern office spaces. That's why we are presenting the downtown activation program to convert existing offices to other uses or to more modernized office, because that's what the current marketplace is demanding. The other parts of the city that have strong submarkets are where there's a strong, healthy mix of residential, because people living there are more apt to go to their office by walk or by some, easy form of transit. The commute is short, and they're also likely to spend money at those retail institutions or the retailers. So the role of visitors, particularly international visitors to DC, is really important, because a regional visitor will come and spend money at a restaurant and maybe a ticket, right? That's what the regional visitor does. The national visitor will come and add to that a couple nights plus a hotel stay. Maybe that's on average $1,000 a visit. The international visitor will come and spend money on retail, on experiences, and specifically get up to $10,000 a visit. What I like about the tourism industry is that we've got a really strong amenity base. We need to continue to market it. And people are making decisions year over year. So they might not have planned for this summer, but for next summer, they could come. So that's infusing revenue much more quickly. I specifically want to give Director Cook the opportunity to talk about the DC Family Fun Destination Program and its success, as well as the other federal tourism dollars.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Councilmember Parker. So in terms of the family fund, the federal dollars, this is an opportunity to really activate our creative economy as we think about how do we create new activations that can generate excitement from our regional, national, and global tourism and tourists that come to the city, but also local as well. And so Family Fun Destination is about creating semi-permanent to even permanent activations downtown in the area that are literally family fun, that can allow us to create these other really exciting things that but the other retailers that are happening, the other food experiences that are happening, the other activities that are already taking place anyway. But how do we continue to create a more robust creative economy throughout downtown? And so our first iteration, the first round, we awarded the National Building Museum, the National Children's Museum, the historical, I think it's the DC History Center is one, also City Place, City Dance place as well. And so as we think about some of the activations that they have that are going on for 5 to 10 years in terms of the awards that we have provided them, we have a round 2 that's out right now and we're currently in review and looking at how do we continue to activate opportunities that are semi-permanent or permanent.
Okay, I am over time. On the next round, I would love to just know what is the size of those grants and how many you're giving or where you could point me to, but thank you all.
Thank you, Councilmember Parker. I'm gonna pick up where I left off and sort of maybe tie it into where you just responded to ask about the capital budget for the new art hub. If you could talk about that, I'd love to know whether or not you anticipate additional funding for that in future fiscal years. But also, you know, what do you contemplate in terms of the boundaries for the arts hub?
So we have heard in our outreach to various theaters, as well as the art community and artist community about where there is pent-up demand right now. There's quite a bit of demand from multiple theaters that would like to locate in Washington, D.C. For what they call a black box theater. It can be shared by multiple theaters. And the thing that's interesting about this is it creates just a lot more dynamic and I guess it brings another dimension to the theater offerings than what we have currently. And so this would be an investment, a capital investment in a property that would be for the build out of a black box theater that could host multiple theater companies there and activate it year round. And actually, I guess I shouldn't brag on Director Cook, but I'm going to do it for half a second here. She used to be a professional dancer with Alvin Ailey on her resume. But as we've been talking about the real opportunity for bringing in, you know, different types of performance art, a black box theater is the type of thing that, again, adds additional dimension to the existing theater you know, offerings and programs that we have now.
No, I appreciate you raising that. And I was aware and I'm still impressed with that part of Director Cook's resume. But I want to ask just, I had a thought when you were talking about the art hub and the black box theater, just, and also the sort of collaboration between DMPED and other agencies. What kind of, if at all, are there any thought about sort of collaborations with students and tying them into some of the things that are in store? And maybe, well, let me just ask the question. Are there any thoughts about how the efforts of DMPED are including students and others who perhaps traditionally aren't contemplated by DMPED when it's doing some of these things. Obviously, DCPS, DCPCS, and other entities are thinking about students and their well-being and their arts and enrichment, but is that something that you all think about when you have these types of projects?
On this particular project, there is a specific opportunity to engage students. So I'm pretty excited about that. We've been working really closely with the Commission on Arts and Humanities on ideating and really coming up with something more creative to bring in more artists. And they've mentioned interest in bringing in students as well. Again, I'll just speak to the cross-collaborative nature of the relationships that we have among the deputy mayors. Deputy Mayor Kine and I have been talking we've mainly been talking about jobs and workforce development, to tell you the truth. But so much of that future job pipeline and talent pipeline starts at a young age. And so I think there's more opportunity for DMPED to think explicitly about how to include students in the opportunities that we're trying to create. So I'm glad that you brought that up. Thank you.
Sure. The proposed capital budget for DMPED includes some collaborations with other agencies, as I alluded to earlier. An ongoing solicitation for proposed mixed-use redevelopment of Chevy Chase Library. Can you talk about that?
Sure. I do not believe that, the capital budget for Chevy Chase Library is not in our capital budget. It's either in the public library system and or DPR's budgets. And that is to fund the replacement of the facilities that currently exist in Chevy Chase, and to fund them in the context of a mixed-use development.
You finish your thought. I sound
Oh,
like
no, that's it.
Oh, it's your thought. Okay. So in terms of what phase of the process are you all in the solicitation though? Like where are you all with that?
So we currently still have an open RFP
Okay.
for that, and anticipating for it to, we extended it just to make sure that we got as broad a set of bidders as possible. But I think it's closing. Do you have a date exactly? Anyway, it's closing soon,
Okay.
in May, I believe.
Okay. The creation of new Parklands Turner Library at a parcel on the St. Elizabeth East Campus. Can you talk about that?
We'll have to get back with you on that. I'm not familiar with that specific project.
Okay. What's happening with the ongoing campus infrastructure for St. Elizabeth East? Any updates to provide?
Well, there's funding in the budget for FY25 going forward for a number of infrastructure improvements to sort of finish out the streets. So 13th Street, Cherry Street, Cypress Street at the intersection of 13th Street, the 13th Street connector reconfiguration of the WMATA bus loop at Congress Heights Metro Station, the relocation of the St. Elizabeth East Guard booth and access road construction, Sycamore Street from Cypress to Pecan Street. I'm going a little more. So it's, an ongoing project to get these done to support all the development.
Okay. What about Poplar Point? What's happening there?
So the money that's in the budget now for Poplar Point is for infrastructure, zoning, and continued remediation on site.
And how much, remind me again, how much is in there? I'm sure I have it.
$1 million.
Yeah, that's right.
Can I speak to Poplar Point for just a
Yes, you
moment?
may. Sure.
So Poplar Point is a project that I worked on 15 years ago. And we have been negotiating and working with the National Park Service to relocate a pretty complex infrastructure project, which is the helipad and also replacement of the
Mhm.
Park Police Headquarters. We've had exciting and just really a good process. And I think that in the next 2-3 months, we will be able to make an announcement over an agreement, an arrangement that's been made with the National Park Service. And so we are anticipating this year next year in FY '25. Quite a bit of activity. We're securing a master planner so that we can create a master plan for Poplar Point. Anyway, we're incredibly excited about this opportunity. It dovetails very nicely with the activity and delivery of the 11th Street Bridge project, and really delivering a world-class waterfront park system and new development in Ward 8 along the water.
And I mentioned Bruce Monroe earlier. We talked a little bit about it, but I'm not sure if I asked this specific question, and I want to do so because a number of public witnesses testified on this point at our budget oversight hearing for public witnesses. What are the funds in fiscal years 25 and 26 for specifically?
Thank you. Sorry. For Bruce Monroe, the funds in the budget are specifically to fund vertical construction.
Okay. The Wharf Fish Market Piers. Talk about where things are for that and what the money in the budget is for.
Yeah, so the money in the budget is for full replacement of 2 piers in a critical need of replacement. One has been blocked off because of its condition. And so that is where we're starting. And a contract is in place for that first pier, and they're working on design right now.
Okay. How much is in FY '24 for that?
FY '24,
Mm-hmm. Is there, you said a contract is already in place
yes,
for design?
For design.
for design,
Got it.
And so the money that's proposed in '25 is to do the construction.
Got it.
exactly.
Okay. I will, I have a question about subtitles, but I'm gonna allow another round for Councilmember Parker.
I wanted to come back very quickly to the amount and quantity of the tourism grants that you were highlighting.
Sure. So for Family Fund, the recipients that I'd mentioned earlier, City Dance, 300,000, DC History Center, 150,000, National Building Museum, 700,000, and then also the National Children's Museum, 1.7 million. And so our second round that's out, we anticipate looking to make roughly anywhere from 5 to 6 more awards in this second round, and that's active right now.
And that's just downtown entities or citywide?
That's just downtown. So it's just for like the Penn West downtown, and it actually goes over into Union Station area where the National Building Museum is as well.
Got it. This is tangential, and that makes me think. I was in the DC Library hearing. They also have money for activations downtown, I believe, namely at the MLK Library. What is there collaboration between your office and the DC Library and how they're trying to think about activating that space?
There is. The DC Library has been a fantastic partner. They're now a true community resource. When we look at surveys of why people go to Gallery Place, MLK Junior Library is often cited as a destination. And so the DC Public Libraries, which has always been focused on family, frankly, and library systems tend to be, we work very collaboratively with them. The executive director of DCPL is on our Gallery Place Chinatown Task Force, as is Events DC, which is another major driver of activation in Gallery Place and in downtown. And so that together with an intentional focus on families and having downtown be a destination for families is part of our strategic move into, one, accommodating visitors that are very often families right now, but also an indicator of the repositioning of downtown towards being more of a mixed-use neighborhood, that it can accommodate families as well as young people and retirees that are coming back to the city.
Nice, nice. I'm going to switch gears to some Ward 5 projects, which I anticipate will be quick hits. I want to just quickly touch on the Old Soldiers Home, McMillan, Pramil. and this Ward 5 Business Center idea that Deputy Mayor, we've talked about at a high level, just so I'm clear on process as we go through this budget. But Old Soldiers Home, that is a development that fell through. Has there been any movement or update that you could provide?
As you know, just for the record, the Old Soldiers Home is owned by a federally sponsored entity. It's not owned by the District of Columbia. They were in a negotiation with a private development team who was working with the Office of Planning and with our office on rezoning that property and also making it more accessible through a street grid network. So we've been a collaborator and partner, but not an owner in the process. As I understand it, the Armed Forces Retirement Home organization terminated the agreement that they were negotiating. It wasn't an agreement, it was in negotiation with their development partner. They've shared with us that they desire to continue working with us directly on the zoning for that site and for the planning of that site. And I've told them that we are very much interested in doing that because it's a great opportunity to deliver yet another significant area that is rich in amenity right now, both for seniors
Yes.
and seniors veterans, as well as a great golf course right in the middle of DC. And so we would like to support them in their efforts in continuing to renovate
Worth
and
noting, Ward
revitalize
5
that.
has two great golf courses
Correct.
right in the center of the city. Macmillan, any updates, important updates you should share there?
Well, there'll be a ribbon cutting event this summer for the new community center, which is exciting. And the money in the capital budget will be the last tranche of public monies going into this project that started, I think, in 2006. So super exciting. And that money will be used to adaptively reuse spaces for public art, STEM, and retail that'll activate the site. And we're working with OP on planning for that.
Nice, nice. For the public spaces for art, I would just say again, and I've said it repeatedly, and I know you are thinking in this way of including neighbors and residents and making it more of a homegrown space for artists to display their work and be a part of that space, I think will be really important. And it goes without saying, this project has been a long time coming from my predecessor to now, and I think it is a win for the district to finally be able to deliver this. And so I'm looking forward to that. Then Cromell, I know a development team has been selected and construction is soon to be underway. Any relevant updates there? I do know residents in the area in Ivy City have talked about a need for soil testing, given just concerns around the environmental climate, if you will, given NEP just a few blocks away. So where are we with Cromell?
So we'll have to direct that to one of either DPR or DGS.
Okay.
It's no longer a DEMPED project, but we'll make sure to get that update to you.
Okay. And then lastly, in the last 40 seconds, I introduced legislation to bring about a Ward 5 business center akin to what exists in Ward 8. What role could DEMPED play in bringing such an entity to life? I'm not asking you to endorse it, but just like what are the possibilities that might exist for this type of business center in a community with DEMPED's leadership?
I think that for opportunities like that, it starts with understanding what demand is. And so I'd be interested in surveying businesses and residents in Ward 5 that have been looking for a home for their business or an ecosystem that would support the development of their business. So I would suggest that we work together on a survey. And I think that gauging demand is one of the most important things to do before expending funds or moving forward, because we want to make sure that there's a reason and that there's, that folks are going to come up and use it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Parker. Just a few more questions, Deputy Mayor. I want to ask about some BSA subtitles. There are several that affect MPED, most making some eligibility changes to broaden certain existing programs and tools. There is one major new program that I want you to talk about. And actually, I think you talked about it a little bit earlier, but I think it's worth expounding on, and that's the Downtown Activation Program. A couple of public witnesses at the public witness hearing identified this as a priority, including people like Hillary Goldfarb. I've also met with several stakeholders over the last year or so about this idea and want to get your thoughts about it, and specifically what type of redevelopment activity you expect to stimulate on what timeline, and if you have any specific projects in mind.
So thank you for that question. As we've been speaking with the property and development community about the viability of converting offices to new uses, it is very clear, particularly at this moment, with interest rates being what they are, with construction costs being what they are, that that conversion equation is not simple and cannot be shouldered by the private sector alone. So some incentive needs to be put in place. What we're seeing some demand for, as I mentioned before, is for trophy office space. There's actually demand currently from existing businesses that want to locate in DC, but they are seeking trophy office. So there's this program could apply to that, which is office to trophy office conversion. And there's also demand for office to hotel or office to extended stay types of uses. And there's a project being proposed on K Street to take a mid-block property, which is pretty unusual and very hard to convert, by the way, from an existing, I think it's a 1970s building, office to right on K Street to be extended stay. So this program would incentivize those types of conversions. And what I'm trying to do, and what we're all trying to do, is to meet the market where it is. And that's to accelerate as many existing vacant or underutilized office buildings, Class B and C office buildings to convert. And we think residential is where there's going to be the highest uptick in conversion. But we don't want to only focus on residential. We want to allow all these other uses that where there is current and pent up demand to actually have a home here in Washington.
Thank you for that. And along those lines, I'm curious as to whether or not you thought about how that specific program, as it's currently described in the budget, allows applicants to potentially time their tax freeze in a way that delays projects and increases tax revenues, particularly given that, generally speaking, assessment values trail market values.
I'm not sure exactly. I mean, we have to, there's a lot of questions that folks will have exactly, you know, what are the eligibility requirements? What are the future uses? When does the tax freeze, you know, what activity? Is it the C of O? Is it the, the acquisition date? When is the tax freeze pinned to? I think that right now, there are a lot of property owners and developers that are seeking to take advantage of prices in the market right now. And so I would want to accelerate and start developing the regulations and rules. And that's what the subtitle is authorizing us to do, is to move forward with development of rules and regulations so that we can make sure that something's on the table and we can explore what the considerations that a private sector entity might have in trying to time their acquisition or time their development. But at this moment, what we want to do is get out of the gates.
Okay. And getting out of the gates, you mean by the regulations? Because
Correct.
if I recall correctly, the funding is in the last couple of years of the financial plan.
That's correct.
Okay. How's the sports unit within the agency going, and what, if anything, are they working on?
Well, they're working on almost all the things. So we're working on Monumental Sports. I'm part of the sports team now, by the way. I guess de facto as the deputy mayor, you're all the things too. But they're also working on a request by nationals, by the Nationals. We're also talking to DC United, because they're looking at a variety of ways to further activate and improve, Audi Field. So, and then obviously we're really, really focused on RFK. The most important thing in our minds is is having that property transferred, period. And so we're anticipating any outcome if the transfer of RFK Stadium is to come to the district.
Got it. And is there still funding in the capital budget for, I think there was maybe like $50 million in the budget. And I haven't looked specifically at it. I'm not sure if I asked my staff to, but there was $50 million previously in the budget at RFK, no?
We'll follow up with you. I know that we are using operating dollars now to fund consultants that would help us with the design and deal making for RFK Stadium, but
Okay. And I don't mean for like, I mean, it was in the budget. You know what, let me go look, because it's been a couple of years.
Yeah.
But it just occurred to me when you said what you said, that there previously had been money over there. But let me ask just, still along the lines of downtown, whether or not DEMPED has in the past or would in the future entertain any use of capital dollars to purchase any distressed assets in the downtown core as part of any sort of demonstration project?
I will reframe how I think DEMPED or the district can support the revitalization and what I call repositioning of downtown. I generally think that it is better to encourage private to private transactions. If there is a building that's currently available for sale, I think that a private sector partner who's best positioned to deliver that project quickly using market resources and private sector resources are best to do that. And we want to encourage that. We don't want to discourage that. But the types of investments that the district can make would be to acquire property that might be to transfer, to demolish and make into green space. So that if we are to have more residents and neighborhoods downtown, you want to accommodate what a resident would want. And that includes green space, that includes dog parks, that includes cultural and civic uses. And so that kind of strategic acquisition activity, I would encourage, and we're keeping an eye to that as we think about, again, looking to creating a submarket plan using in our FY25 proposal so that we can identify areas that would really lend themselves to making our downtown submarkets viable neighborhoods.
Thank you for that. I'll turn again to Councilmember Parker for a final round.
There should be two more questions. As a member of the Housing Committee, I wanted to come back to our discussion about Berry Farms. It's my understanding that money has not gotten out of the door yet for fiscal year 24. Can you confirm that for the development? That projected capital funding for the development?
Oh, sorry. A DFA is in council right now for passive approval. So after that, we'd be ready to execute the DFA and fund, I believe it is for about $21 million.
And I'm also being told that the capital investment for Berry Farms is being reevaluated, which just puts the entire development in question. Can you speak to this reevaluation?
So it's a tough, it's a tough budget cycle, but we remain committed to the new communities projects. And so, we would not have put it into before council if we weren't anticipating that we'd be able to execute this DFA and move forward on the project.
So can you give some sense of a timeline of when you're expecting to push out the $21 million, but also to enter MOUs with the development team there. Because what I've heard, and just in full transparency, the development team has engaged with the housing committee as we're all really interested in this. And what we're hearing is that, well, we're in a holding pattern because DCHA and DMPED haven't entered into MOUs with us.
Oh, well, I will just say that the closing on this is anticipated based on when the GFA comes out of council. And like I said, it's like a matter of days now because it's 10-day passive approval. So while there is a shortfall in our capital budget for FY24, you know, we will make whatever, you know, adjustments are necessary in order to further that project.
And is that reflected in the fiscal year 25?
Well, I think just because
Budget?
of timing, it's not. Because we
So when would
we
you-
wouldn't want it to be in FY25 budget because the intent is for that project to close like a month or so after we come out of council with the DFA. They're
Okay.
ready to go.
They are ready to go.
Yes.
And I'm hearing DMPED is where the holdup is. And so I'm hearing you say you're moving towards getting money out the door, and the original projection date was 2030. They are saying, well, that date will continue to slide until we have MOUs and work begins.
I'm sorry, the 2030 date is what?
Their projected completion date, as I understand it.
Yes, and we're still anticipating.
But they're warning us that that date will not be the completion date if things don't get started.
Councilmember Parker, I'd like to get back to you on some specific dates and also what the schedule is contingent on.
Okay.
Sounds to me like there is council approval that's needed. We should make sure that we understand the timeline and get that to you, but also give you more specifics as to when folks can expect to receive whatever documentation
Yeah.
they need.
And also what the shortfall for fiscal year 24, when exactly are you anticipating of making that up, if not in fiscal year 25?
Okay,
That
we
would
will
be
do that.
helpful. Then last thing, I heard Councilmember Henderson bring up World Pride. Two questions there. One, what role exactly will DMPED be playing? I know the pop-up grants was announced, and I imagine you will have a role to play there in activating downtown. A question still remains, and I know it's my understanding the money is expected to be funneled through the Office of LGBTQ Affairs. They have a grant cap of $50,000, as I understand it. And that does not bode well for being able to spend $5 million. I know we all need to work together to figure this out, but just what role will DMPED play in World Pride and making sure it's a success?
Well, let me just say, we're all committed to making World
Yes.
Pride a success. And so we'll work, and actually we've had a great relationship with the Office of LGBTQ Affairs. Japer and the team there are great. So we will work with them. If their office is capped in terms of capacity, then in terms of grant making capacity, we can support them. Or alternatively, if we need to seek legislation to give them the grant making capacity that they need, we'll do that too. So I have no doubt that
Okay.
World Pride is sort of top of our
And then in
list to make
terms of
sure
the
it's
pop-up
successful.
grants, are you doing any solicitation in partnership with the office to lure businesses and or activations downtown for World Pride?
Well, certainly, the budget proposals that we put in on a couple different fronts. One is for festivals, $3 million fund in FY25, as well as the $2.5 million that we're requesting in support of pop-ups in 25, can all contribute to support a really successful World Pride.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to it. But thank you all for being here today.
I'm just sitting here listening. I do have actually two more questions. I asked about a number of the larger projects, and thank you, Councilmember Parker. But I want to just get a little bit more specific with two, McMillan and Walter Reed. you mentioned in response to Councilman Parker, the community center, which people are excited about, and seeing it go up looks great. But what about the other phases of the project? Residential, the multifamily, the retail, any updates with those? Acknowledging, the slowdown and some of the challenges with the history of appeals and what it did and how it impacted that project over the years.
So I will get back to you on specific timing
Okay,
on the developments.
got it. And then what about Walter Reed? I didn't ask about that. How are things going on the campus of Walter Reed?
Sorry, what was your question?
Walter Reed?
What about it?
How are things going on the campus of Walter Reed? I know that there's been, at least last year, there was the opening of the grocery store. There's a number of units of residential there. How's leasing going on the residential, the multifamily?
So we'll have to get back to you on the leasing, but I will say that in terms of what's ongoing in the planning or under construction is the veranda at the parks, which is 141 townhomes and 2 over 2s, and those are for sale.
Who's the developer on those?
I'll have to get back to you on that as well.
I believe it's Toll Brothers.
And that's in pre-construction. Parcel L, which will be 287 rental apartment units, is in pre-construction. The Renard, 345 rental apartment units, is under construction. The Aspen Square, 50 for sale townhomes, that's under construction as well. And then there's a bunch of future planning projects, Building 12, which is anticipated to be creative office and retail. Construction is supposed to start in 2024. Building 6 and 7, Howard University outpatient care and classroom space. Construction is supposed to start on that in 2024. Buildings 8 and 9, single-family for-sale homes, sales start in 2024. Building 82, food and beverage, construction is supposed to start in 2024. And Building 15, creative food and beverage, construction is supposed to start in 2025. Building 16, the DPR pool house, construction is supposed to start on that in 2025. So that's.
I would love to get a more comprehensive update. I appreciate that update.
Yeah.
But like getting some specifics around who's
Absolutely.
doing what, to understand how compliance is going around CBEs for source. It's such a huge site, and there's been, I know, ongoing activity there, but and maybe even on a nice day, if the deputy mayor is in the neighborhood, I'd love to walk the site and just check it out. So I'd love to be able to do something like that if that is of interest to you.
It would be. That'd be great. And honestly, there is no substitute for understanding what's going on site and how it relates to the surrounding community and neighborhood than being out on site. So totally welcome and would love to do that. The other thing I wanted to mention is that earlier this year, in terms of Walter Reed, we put out a $500,000 grant RFP for retail. And I believe that we're still in the process of taking applications for that. But again, just continuing to invest in Walter Reed so it is successful.
I'm glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. Thank you. I don't have any additional questions for you at the moment. Is there anything else that you would like to add to the record before we close out?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to go back for the record to talk about Food Access Fund. You
Sure.
asked about the supplemental. So there's a $30 million reduction to the supplemental. That's, I think, believable for you guys now, before council.
Okay.
You also asked about what the balance is in food access. And it's about 5.8 million, all in the process of being obligated.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for the update. I'd like to thank, anything else, Deputy Mayor?
I just want to recap a couple key things.
Sure.
Economic development in a city like DC is a comprehensive set of activities. It's not one versus another. It's not downtown versus neighborhoods. It's not small businesses versus large. It's not international versus local. It's all of the above, all at once. We've been doing it in the past, and we need to keep doing more of it in the future. I'm really excited because we have a moment right now while things are slow in the real estate market to plan ahead. And that's what the investment of our dollars in FY '25 is. It's ensuring that there are near-term activations and investments so that there is vibrancy in our community and to respond to demand where demand exists today. But to use the rest of our time and energy on planning. So when the market loosens up, when those interest rates start to come down, when those capital markets start to seek locations to invest, that they want to invest here because we're a great place to do business, because we have incentives in place, and because we have plans that businesses can act on. That's the activity and priority for FY '25. I'm incredibly appreciative of the council, of yourself, your committee, for being invested. But I just want to put out there that the FY '25 economic development budget is how to support the vibrancy across the entire city. Downtown is an important component of that, but it is not the only component. And I'm just incredibly excited that we are going to continue to be able to deliver projects across all 8 wards in 2025. You heard Esther talk about, McMillan, Walter Reed, St. Elizabeth's, Park Morton, which has been long awaited. These are going to move. They're going to continue to move forward and sustain and buoy our economy as we continue to pivot in downtown. But it's not one at the expense of other. It's on firing on all 5 cylinders and making sure that we're moving forward on all fronts, because we can do it and we have done it.
Well, I'm glad to hear you add that to the record. I'm sure there are a lot of people across the District of Columbia who need to hear that and want to hear that. And so with that, I want to thank you and your entire team. I want to thank the CFO's office who joined us previously today, as well as all the other witnesses, both government and public witnesses who testified before the committee during this budget oversight process. This marks the end of our budget oversight hearings. Now the committee will deliberate on the testimony from the public and the government witnesses and work on adjustments and recommendations for the committee's budget report. The committee will bring its recommendations to the full committee at our markup on Friday, May 10th. There being no further business before the committee, this marks the end of today's hearing. The time is now 1:20 p.m. And this hearing is adjourned.